In the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, a cryptic letter arrives from Miss Marple. The locket bears a stark truth. Find it, or the village will pay. What secret lies within the silver locket, hidden for decades by lovers torn apart by greed? As Miss Marple and Tommy Beresford unravel a trail of clues from a haunted oak to a forgotten chapel, dark shadows stalk their every move. Who is the mysterious stranger threatening violence? Why does Jacob Harrow risk everything for a relic, tied to a century-old feud? And what truth could shatter the powerful Grayson family? With danger closing in, Miss Marple's sharp mind faces its greatest test, uncovering a deed that could rewrite history or destroy it. Will she find the locket before its truth claims a deadly price? Chapter 1. The Curious Bequest. The morning mist clung to the cobblestones of St. Mary Mead, like a shy guest reluctant to leave. Miss Jane Marple, her silver hair neatly pinned beneath a sensible hat, sat by the window of her cottage, her knitting, needles clicking in a rhythm as steady as the village clock. The roses outside her window glowed faintly in the dawn, their petals heavy with dew, but her sharp eyes were fixed on something far less ordinary. A parcel, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, resting on her polished oak table. It had arrived without fanfare, delivered by young Tommy Pierce, the postman's boy, who'd pedaled up the lane with his usual cheerful whistle. The parcel bore no return address, only her name in a looping, elegant script that stirred a flicker of recognition. Miss Marple's fingers, nimble despite her years, paused mid-stitch. She set her knitting aside and reached for the parcel. Her curiosity piqued as sharply as a thorn. The paper crackled as she unwrapped it, revealing a small wooden box, its surface etched with intricate carvings of ivy and stars. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a tarnished silver locket, its clasp stiff with age. Beside it was a letter folded with care, the ink slightly smudged but legible. Miss Marple adjusted her spectacles and began to read. My dearest. Jane, the letter began, if this reaches you, I am no longer among the living. Forgive the drama, but you always had a knack for seeing through shadows to the truth. This locket holds a key, not the kind that opens doors, but one that bears a stark truth hidden in St. Mary Mead for too long. Find the relic it points to, and you'll unravel a secret that has haunted our family. Trust your instincts, as you always have. Yours, Eliza. Eliza, Miss Marple's cousin, a woman of fierce spirit and guarded heart, who'd lived on the fringes of the village years ago before moving to London and fading from contact. Her death, though expected after a long illness, sent a pang through Miss Marple's chest. But the letter's words of stark truth stirred something deeper. Eliza had always been enigmatic, her life a tapestry of half-told stories. What relic could she mean, and why send it now? Miss Marple turned the locket over in her hands. It was heavy, its surface engraved with a delicate rose entwined with a crescent moon. She pressed the clasp, expecting resistance, but it sprang open with a soft click. Inside was a tiny portrait, faded but clear. A young woman with Eliza's high cheekbones, her eyes bright with defiance. There was no photograph on the other side, only a faint inscription, E.H. 1895. The initials matched Eliza Harrow, but the date was curious decades before Miss Marple's time with her cousin. The village clock chimed 8, pulling her from her thoughts. She tucked the locket into her cardigan pocket and stood, her mind already weaving possibilities. St. Mary Mead was a quiet place, its scandals small and predictable petty thefts, gossip about affairs, the occasional squabble over garden boundaries. But Eliza's letter suggested something older, something buried. Miss Marple knew better than most that even the sleepiest villages held secrets, like stones beneath a calm stream. She decided to start at the vicarage. The Reverend Clement, a kind man with a penchant for local history, might recall something about Eliza or the locket's design. Besides, his wife, Griselda, was hosting a tea that morning, and there was no better place to catch the village's pulse than over scones and chatter. The walk to the vicarage was brisk, the air sharp with the scent of damp earth and late roses. St. Mary Mead unfolded around her, ivy-clad cottages, the butcher's shop with its cheerful red awning, children chasing a hoop down the lane. Miss Marple nodded to Mrs. Price, who was sweeping her doorstep, and sidestepped a stray cat that darted across her path. The village seemed its usual self, yet the locket in her pocket felt like a weight, a reminder that something was amiss. The vicarage gate creaked as she pushed it open. Griselda, a whirlwind of energy in a floral dress, greeted her with a hug that nearly knocked her spectacles askew. "Miss Marple, you're just in time for the lemon drizzle. Come, come, the others are already gossiping." The drawing-room was a cozy chaos of teacups and laughter. Mrs. Bantry, with her booming voice, was recounting a tale about Colonel Bantry's latest fishing mishap, while Miss Weatherby fussed over a plate of biscuits. The vicar sat by the fire, his spectacles perched on his nose, as he leafed through a parish register. Miss Marple settled into a chintz armchair, accepting a cup of tea from Griselda. "Jane, you look positively mysterious today, Mrs. Bantry," sighed her eyes twinkling. "Have you uncovered some dreadful secret about the church fete?" Miss Marple smiled, her expression serene, but her mind alert. "Not quite, Dolly. Just a bit of family history I'm puzzling over. Tell me, does anyone recall my cousin, Eliza Harrow? She lived here briefly years ago." The room stilled, the clink of teacups pausing. The vicar looked up, his brow furrowed. "Eliza Harrow? The name rings a bell. Wasn't she connected to Lady Harrow, who lived at the manor in the last century?" "Possibly," Miss Marple said, her tone light, but her attention sharp. "I've come across something of hers, a locket rather old. It's got me curious." Griselda leaned forward, her eyes wide. "A locket? Oh, how romantic. Was it engraved with hearts or secret messages?" "Nothing so dramatic," Miss Marple said, though she felt the locket's weight in her pocket. "But it's finely made, with a rose and moon design. I wondered if it might be familiar." The vicar closed his register with a thoughtful hum. "That sounds like something I've seen in the parish archives. Lady Harrow, Eliza's aunt, I believe, was known for her jewelry. She vanished rather mysteriously in 1895, you know. Left the manor to her nephew, but there were rumors of a scandal." "Scandal?" Mrs. Bantry pounced on the word. "What sort? An elopement? A theft?" "Nothing so clear-cut," the vicar said. "Just Whisper's family troubles, perhaps. The manor's been with the Grimsby family ever since. Of course, Mr. Grimsby's not the friendliest sort, but he might know more." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind cataloguing the details. Lady Harrow's disappearance, the locket's date, Isa's cryptic letter. It was a puzzle, and she loved puzzles. But her thoughts were interrupted by a new voice, young and hesitant, from the doorway. "Beg pardon, Mrs. Clement," said Tom, the gardener's boy, his cap clutched in his hands. "I brought the roses you asked for." His eyes darted to Miss Marple, and she caught a flicker of unease in his expression, as if he'd overheard their talk of the locket. "Thank you, Tom," Griselda said, taking the bouquet. "Stay for a biscuit, won't you?" Tom shuffled his feet, his freckled face flushed. "Can't, ma'am. Work to do, but—" "Miss Marple, did you say a locket? With a rose and moon?" Miss Marple's gaze sharpened, though her smile remained gentle. "I did. Have you seen one like it?" Tom hesitated, his fingers twisting the cap. "Maybe. In the manor garden, once. Found something shiny, but I thought it was junk. Didn't take it." The room buzzed with curiosity, but Miss Marple kept her focus on Tom. "How interesting. Perhaps you could show me where, later?" "I'd hate to trouble you, but it might be important." Tom nodded, his eyes wide, and hurried out. Mrs. Bantry chuckled. "Jane, you've got that look. You're onto something, aren't you?" "Just a thread to tug," Miss Marple said, her voice mild, but her mind racing. Tom's reaction was no coincidence. The boy knew more than he let on, and the manor garden might hold the next piece of the puzzle. The tea party continued, but Miss Marple's thoughts were elsewhere. She excused herself early, citing a need to tend her roses, though her true aim was to prepare for a visit to Tom. The locket, the letter, Lady Harrow's disappearance, it was all connected, she was sure. And in St. Mary Mead, where every glance and whisper held meaning, she knew the truth was closer than it seemed. As she walked home, the locket pressed against her side, a quiet reminder of Eliza's plea. Miss Marple's steps were steady, her mind alight with possibilities. She would find this relic, whatever it was, and uncover the stark truth it promised. For now she had a starting point: Tom, the manor garden, and a boy's nervous glance. The game, as her friend Sherlock might say, was afoot. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by her hearth, the locket on the table before her. She traced its engravings with a finger, her thoughts as intricate as the rose and moon design. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like secrets waiting to be told. She would begin with Tom tomorrow, gently coaxing out what he knew. For now she was content, the first thread of the mystery firmly in her grasp, her resolve as unyielding as the oak in her garden. Chapter 2. The map's first clue. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Miss Marple's cozy cottage in St. Mary Mead, casting delicate patterns on the polished oak table where she sat, her eyes fixed on the cryptic map from the vicarage journal. The paper, yellowed and brittle, bore a faint sketch of the village, its lines crisscrossing like veins in a leaf. Strange symbols, half-moons, crossed arrows, and a peculiar spiral marked specific points with a bold X. Beneath the ancient oak tree, at the edge of the village green, the locket, if the anonymous letter was to be believed, lay somewhere along this trail, its secret poised to unravel a truth that had slept for decades. Miss Marple adjusted her spectacles, her fingers tracing the map's edges. "A puzzle, indeed," she murmured, her voice soft but laced with curiosity. The letter's words echoed in her mind. "The locket bears a stark truth, Miss Marple. Find it, or the village will pay." Cryptic, melodramatic, yet undeniably intriguing. She sipped her tea, the porcelain cup warm against her palms, and considered her next move. The oak tree was a logical start, but she'd need assistance, someone young, spry, and discreet. Her thoughts turned to Tommy Beresford, the vicar's nephew, a bright lad of 17, with a knack for puzzles and a heart full of adventure. A knock at the door broke her reverie. "Come in, Tommy," she called, knowing his eager rap by heart. The door swung open, revealing Tommy's lanky frame, his sandy hair tousled from the morning breeze. He carried a satchel slung over one shoulder, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Aunt Jane, you sent for me?" he asked, plopping into a chair with the casual grace of youth. "Vicar said you found something odd in his old books." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Odd is an understatement, my dear. Look at this." She slid the map across the table, watching Tommy's face light up as he scanned the symbols. "It's a map, Tommy, and I believe it leads to something rather important, a silver locket, lost for years with a secret inside. The first clue points to the old oak by the green. Care to join me on a little treasure hunt?" Tommy's grin was answer enough. "A treasure hunt? Count me in. But why the oak? It's just a tree, isn't it?" "Not just any tree," Miss Marple replied, rising to fetch her shawl. "It's the oldest in St. Mary Mead, planted before the village. Had a name. If secrets are buried, that's where they'd start." They set off across the village, the morning air crisp with the scent of dew-soaked grass. St. Mary Mead bustled quietly. Mrs. Price at the bakery waved, her apron dusted with flour, while Mr. Hodgins trundled past with his milk cart, the bottles. Clinking, the oak loomed ahead, its gnarled branches sprawling like an ancient guardian. Its trunk, thick and weathered, bore scars from centuries of storms, and curious children carving their initials. Miss Marple paused beneath its canopy, the map clutched in her gloved hand. "Now, Tommy," she said, pointing to the EX on the map, "this mark suggests something is hidden at the base. Perhaps a root, a hollow, or something buried." Tommy dropped to his knees, his hands brushing away leaves and dirt. "Like pirate's treasure?" he asked, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Less gold, more history," Miss Marple said wryly. "But just as valuable, I suspect." They searched the roots, their fingers probing for anything unusual. The ground was hard, packed by years. Afoot traffic, but Tommy's keen eyes caught a patch of earth slightly looser than the rest, near a root that curled like a sleeping serpent. "Here, Aunt Jane," he called, digging with a stick. The soil gave way, revealing a rusted tin box, its surface etched with faint engravings, a rose entwined with a thorn. Miss Marple's heart quickened. "Careful, Tommy, let's not damage it." She knelt beside him, her knees protesting the damp ground, and together they pried the box open. Inside lay a single photograph, its edges curled with age. The image showed a woman in a high-necked dress, her dark hair pinned elegantly, a silver locket gleaming at her throat. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, seemed to stare straight through time. "Who is she?" Tommy whispered, holding the photograph to the light. Miss Marple studied the image, her mind racing. The woman's features were striking high cheekbones, a delicate jaw, but what caught her attention was the locket. Its intricate design, a swirl of vines around a central gem, matched the description in the anonymous letter. "I don't know her name," Miss Marple admitted, "but I've seen those features before. She resembles Someone from the Grayson family, perhaps? The Graysons from Haverford Manor? Tommy's eyes widened. They're practically royalty around here. You think this locket belongs to them? Or belonged to someone they'd rather forget, Miss Marple said. Softly, she tucked the photograph into her handbag, her mind already piecing together possibilities. The Graysons were St. Mary Mead's most prominent family, their wealth rooted in land and influence. But prominence often hid shadows, and Miss Marple had a knack for finding them dot as they stood. A shadow flickered at the edge of the green, a figure, half hidden by the hedgerow, watching them. Tommy tensed, but Miss Marple placed a calming hand on his arm. "Don't stare, dear. Let's pretend we haven't noticed." She led him toward the village shop, her pace unhurried, but her senses sharp. The figure didn't follow, but the weight of their gaze lingered dot inside the shop. Miss Marple purchased a tin of biscuits, using the transaction to glance out the window. The figure was gone. "Tommy," she said quietly, "did you recognize that person by the hedge?" Tommy shook his head. Too far away. But they were tall, wearing a dark coat, looked sneaky. "Sneaky is a good word," Miss Marple mused. She handed him a biscuit, her mind elsewhere. The photograph, the map, the watcher, it all pointed to a secret someone wanted buried. But why send her the letter? Why draw her into this puzzle? Back at her cottage, Miss Marple spread the map and photograph on the table. Tommy sat across from her, munching thoughtfully. "What's next, Aunt Jane?" "The map's got more symbols, look. This one's a crescent moon near the church." "Miss." Marple nodded, but her attention was on the photograph. She turned it over, revealing faint handwriting on the back, E.G. 1923. E.G., she murmured. "Could be initials. Elizabeth Grayson, perhaps. Or someone else entirely." Tommy leaned forward. "You think she's the key to this? The woman in the picture?" "I think she's part of it," Miss Marple said. "The locket was hers, and it holds something important enough to hide and to watch us for. We need to learn more about her, and the Graysons are the place to start." "But they're so posh," Tommy said, wrinkling his nose. "Lady Grayson barely talks to anyone. How do we get into Haverford Manor?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Oh, Tommy, you'd be surprised how far a polite visit and a bit of flattery can take you. Tomorrow we'll call on Lady Grayson. I'll bring my best jam tarts as an excuse." That evening, as Tommy headed home, Miss Marple sat by her fireplace, the photograph in her lap. The woman's face haunted her not just for its resemblance to the Graysons, but for the defiance in her eyes. Whoever she was, she'd worn that locket with purpose. Miss Marple's fingers traced the map's symbols, her mind weaving threads of possibility. A scandal, perhaps? A betrayal? The locket held the truth, and she was determined to find it. The next morning, Miss Marple dressed in her finest tweed, her hat pinned at a jaunty angle. She packed a basket with jam tarts, their golden crusts fragrant with raspberry, and met Tommy at the village green. The walk to Haverford Manor was pleasant, the path winding past hedgerows bursting with late summer blooms. Tommy carried the basket, his chatter about cricket matches a cheerful contrast to Miss Marple's quiet focus. Haverford Manor loomed ahead, its stone facade grand but weathered, ivy clinging to its walls like secrets. Miss Marple knocked, and a stern-faced butler ushered them into a parlor adorned with portraits of stern-faced Graysons. Lady Grayson, a tall woman with silver hair and a guarded smile, greeted them with polite curiosity. "Miss Marple, what a surprise," she said, her voice smooth but cautious. "And young Tommy, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Miss Marple offered the tarts, her smile disarming. "Just a neighborly visit, Lady Grayson. I found something curious in the vicarage archives, a photograph, perhaps of one of your ancestors. I thought you might know her." She produced the photograph, watching Lady Grayson's face closely. The woman's smile faltered, her fingers tightening on her teacup. "How interesting," she said, her tone clipped. "May I see it?" Miss Marple handed it over, noting the slight tremor in Lady Grayson's hand. "The locket caught my eye," she said casually. "Quite distinctive. Do you recognize it?" Lady Grayson's eyes flicked to the photograph, then away. "It's an old family piece, I believe. Long lost. Where did you find this?" "In a tin box under the oak," Miss Marple said, her voice light but her gaze sharp. "Along with a map. It seems someone wanted it found." The air in the parlor grew heavy. Lady Grayson set the photograph down, her smile gone. A map? How quaint. Probably a child's game. "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, sipping her tea. "But I do love a puzzle. Don't you, Tommy?" Tommy nodded, catching her cue. "Sure do. That locket looks valuable. Bet there's a story behind it." Lady Grayson's laugh was brittle. "Stories are often exaggerated, young man. If you'll excuse me, I have matters to attend to." As they left the manor, Tommy whispered, "She knows something, doesn't she?" "Oh, yes," Miss Marple replied, her eyes narrowing. "And she's not pleased we're asking." They paused by the gate, the manor's shadow stretching across the lawn. Miss Marple glanced at the map, the crescent moon symbol by the church, glowing in her mind's eye. But another thought nagged at her, the watcher by the hedge. Someone else was following this trail, and they weren't friendly. "Tommy," she said, her voice low, "we need to be careful. The locket's truth is stirring things up, and not everyone wants it revealed." They headed toward the church, the map's next clue calling. The photograph, tucked safely in Miss Marple's handbag, felt heavier than its size warranted. The woman's face, the locket's gleam, Lady Grayson's unease, all pieces of a puzzle that promised a stark truth. As the church spire came into view, Miss Marple felt a thrill of anticipation. The trail was just beginning, and she was ready for whatever it uncovered. Chapter 3. Shadows in the manor. The late summer sun dipped low over St. Mary Mead, painting the stone walls of Haverford Manor in hues of gold and shadow. Miss Marple, her arm linked with Tommy's, approached the grand estate with a basket of jam tarts swinging gently at her side. The photograph of the mysterious woman, tucked safely in her handbag, alongside the cryptic map, weighed heavily on her mind. Lady Grayson's guarded reaction to the locket's mention yesterday had confirmed Miss Marple's suspicions. The manor held secrets, and the trail to the lost relic led straight through its imposing doors. Tommy adjusted his cap, his eyes darting to the manor's towering windows. "Aunt Jane, you sure about this?" Lady Grayson didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat last time. Miss Marple's lips curved into a serene smile. "My dear Tommy, a little resistance only means we're getting closer to the truth. Besides, I brought my best tarts. Few can resist those." They reached the entrance, where the same stern butler, Mr. Hargreaves, greeted them with a raised eyebrow. "Miss Marple, Master Beresford," he said, his voice as stiff as his starched collar. "Lady Grayson is in the conservatory. I'll see if she's available." As they waited in the foyer, Miss Marple's eyes roamed the portraits lining the walls. Severe faces stared back, their eyes following her generations of Graysons, each exuding an air of untouchable authority. One portrait, half hidden in a shadowed corner, caught her attention. It depicted a young woman with the same sharp cheekbones as the one in the photograph, though her expression was softer, almost wistful. The nameplate read Eleanor Grayson, 1922. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. E.G., she thought, recalling the initials on the photograph's back. Hargreaves returned, his face impassive. "Lady Grayson will see you. Follow me." The conservatory was a glass-domed haven of greenery, filled with exotic ferns and blooming orchids. Lady Grayson sat at a wrought iron table, her silver hair gleaming under the sunlight streaming through the panes. She wore a lavender dress, her posture regal but her eyes wary as Miss Marple and Tommy approached. "Miss Marple, how kind of you to visit again so soon," she said, her tone polite but cool. "And with young Tommy. What brings you back?" "Miss." Marple set the basket of tarts on the table, her smile disarming. "Just a neighborly gesture, Lady Grayson. I thought you might enjoy these tarts, and I hope to ask a bit more about that photograph. It's piqued my curiosity, you see." Lady Grayson's fingers tightened around her teacup, though her smile remained fixed. "The photograph?" As I sighed, "It's likely some forgotten family trinket. Nothing worth fussing over." Tommy, sensing an opportunity, leaned forward. "But it's such a neat locket. My aunt says it might be tied to a village mystery. Don't you think that's exciting?" "Lady?" Grayson's laugh was sharp, like glass breaking. "Exciting? Oh, young man, you've been reading too many adventure novels. Old jewelry often carries stories, but they're rarely true." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes never leaving Lady Grayson's face. "Perhaps, but this locket seems special. The map we found with the photograph points to it, and I couldn't help noticing a resemblance between the woman in the picture and your ancestor, Eleanor Grayson. Was she important to the family?" The air in the conservatory grew still. Lady Grayson set her cup down with a clink, her composure faltering for a fraction of a second. "Eleanor? She was. A distant cousin, a troubled girl from what I've heard. Died young, I believe. I don't see why she'd matter now." Miss Marple nodded, her expression serene but her mind racing. "Troubled girl, died young." The words felt rehearsed, like a story meant to deflect questions. She decided to press gently. "How sad. Do you have any of her belongings? Perhaps the locket itself?" Lady Grayson's eyes narrowed. "If we had such a thing, it would be in the family vault, not lying about for village gossip. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a busy afternoon." Before Miss Marple could respond, a soft thud echoed from the hallway beyond the conservatory. Tommy's head snapped toward the sound, his eyes wide. "What was that?" he whispered, "Lady." Grayson rose, her movements brisk. "Likely just Hargreaves moving furniture. This old house is full of noises. If you'll follow me, I'll see you out." But Miss Marple's curiosity was far from sated. As they followed Lady Grayson through the manor's labyrinthine halls, she noticed a heavy oak bookcase against one wall, its shelves sagging under leather-bound tomes. A faint draught brushed her cheek, coming from behind the bookcase, a telltale sign of a hidden space. She exchanged a glance with Tommy, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Lady Grayson," Miss Marple said, pausing by the bookcase. "This is a magnificent piece. Is it original to the manor?" Lady Grayson hesitated, her hand on the doorframe. "Yes, quite old. My great-grandfather's, I believe. Now, if you don't mind—" "Oh, I'd love a closer look," Miss Marple said, stepping toward the bookcase before Lady Grayson could protest. She ran her fingers along the edge, her touch light but deliberate. A faint click sounded, and the bookcase shifted slightly, revealing a narrow gap. Tommy's eyes lit up, but Miss Marple kept her expression neutral. "Goodness, what's this?" she said, feigning surprise. "A secret passage? How delightful!" Lady Grayson's face paled. "It's nothing, just a quirk of the house. Old manors are full of such things." "Please, Miss Marple, it's not safe." But Miss Marple was already peering into the gap where a stone staircase descended into darkness. "Tommy, fetch the torch from your satchel, dear," she said calmly. "We must see where this leads." Lady Grayson stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Miss Marple, I insist you leave this alone. It's private property." "Of course," Miss Marple said, her tone soothing. "But as a concerned neighbor, I'd hate to think of hidden dangers in your home. Just a quick look, and we'll be on our way." Tommy produced a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. The staircase was narrow, its stones worn, smooth by time. Miss Marple descended carefully, Tommy close behind, while Lady Grayson hovered at the top, her protests fading into tight-lipped silence. The passage led to a small, musty chamber, its walls lined with cobwebs and forgotten crates. In the center stood a heavy wooden chest, its iron lock rusted but intact. Carved into the lid was the same rose and thorn motif as on the tin box from the oak tree. Miss Marple's heart quickened. "Tommy, look at this," she said, her voice low. "It's no coincidence." Tommy knelt beside the chest, his fingers tracing the carving. "Think the locket's in there?" "Possibly," Miss Marple said, her eyes scanning the chamber. "Or something that brings us closer to it." Lady Grayson's voice echoed down. The stairs strained with urgency. "Miss Marple, please, come back up. That chest is just old junk. You're trespassing." Miss Marple ignored her, her attention fixed on the chest. The lock was formidable, but a faint scratch mark suggested it had been opened recently. Tommy checked the crates. There might be a key. Tommy rummaged through the crates, pulling out moth-eaten fabrics and cracked porcelain. At the bottom of one he found a small brass key, its head engraved with the initials E.G. "Aunt Jane, got it," he said, holding it aloft. Miss Marple took the key, her fingers steady despite the thrill coursing through her. She inserted it into the lock, which turned with a reluctant groan. The lid creaked open, revealing a bundle of yellowed letters tied with a faded ribbon. She lifted them carefully, noting the elegant handwriting addressed to "My dearest Eleanor." Before she could read further, footsteps echoed on the stairs. Lady Grayson appeared, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Miss Marple, this is unacceptable. Those are private family papers. Hand them over." Miss Marple closed the chest, tucking the letters into her handbag. "I'm terribly sorry, Lady Grayson, but these may be connected to the locket. I'll return them once I've ensured they're not evidence of something untoward." Lady Grayson's eyes flashed, but she stepped aside as Miss Marple and Tommy ascended the stairs. "You're meddling in things you don't understand," she said, her voice low. "Be careful, Miss Marple." Back in the foyer, Miss Marple maintained her composure, though her mind buzzed with questions. The letters, the passage, Lady Grayson's agitation, it all pointed to a secret the manor was desperate to keep. As they stepped outside, Tommy whispered, "She's hiding something big, isn't she?" "Oh, yes," Miss Marple said, her eyes on the manor's windows, where a curtain twitched. "And we're only beginning to uncover it." That evening, in the quiet of her cottage, Miss Marple untied the ribbon and spread the letters on her table. They were love letters, penned by a man named Charles Thorne to Eleanor Grayson, dated 1920 to 1923. The words were tender, but laced with urgency, speaking of a forbidden romance and a locket that held proof of our bond. One letter mentioned a meeting at the church crypt, where Eleanor had hidden something to protect us both. Miss Marple leaned back, her knitting needles clicking softly. Charles Thorne, a name tied to the rival Thorne family, whose feud with the Graysons was village legend. The locket, it seemed, was more than a trinket. It was a key to a scandal that had torn two families apart. But why had Lady Grayson reacted so strongly? And who had opened the chest recently? As she pondered, a soft creak came from her garden gate. She rose, peering through the window. A figure stood in the shadows, tall and cloaked, watching her cottage. The same watcher from the village green, she was certain. She drew the curtains, her heart steady, but her resolve firm. The locket's trail was growing dangerous, but Miss Marple was no stranger to shadows. The church crypt was the next clue, and she would follow it no matter who was watching. Chapter 4. The Key to the Past. The morning mist hung low over St. Mary Mead, cloaking the village in a silvery veil as Miss Marple sat at her kitchen table. The bundle of love letters from Haverford Manor's hidden chest spread before her. The elegant script of Charles Thorne, penned to Eleanor Grayson, spoke of a love forbidden by family feuds and a locket that held proof of our bond. One letter, more cryptic than the rest, mentioned a meeting at the church crypt and a key that would unlock the truth. Miss Marple's fingers traced the map from the vicarage journal, its crescent moon symbol marking the crypt as the next step in her quest for the lost relic. But the watcher in the shadows, glimpsed last night outside her cottage, lingered in. Her thoughts, a reminder that this puzzle was not hers alone to solve. She sipped her tea, her eyes narrowing as she considered the letter's implications. The Graysons and Thornes, locked in a bitter rivalry over land and legacy, had buried more than their feud. They'd hidden a scandal, and the locket was its key. But a key required a lock, and the chest in the manor had already yielded its secrets. Miss Marple suspected another clue awaited one that might point to the locket itself. A brisk knock at the door announced Tommy Beresford's arrival. He burst in, his cheeks flushed from the chilly morning air, his satchel slung over one shoulder. "Aunt Jane, you're up early? Got any more of those biscuits?" he asked, plopping into a chair. Miss Marple smiled, sliding a tin of shortbread across the table. "Help yourself, dear. But we've work to do. Those letters from the manor mention a key, and I've a hunch it's not the one we found. We need to visit Mr. Pym's antique shop. He's the village's memory for old trinkets, and if anyone knows about a key tied to the Graysons or Thorns, it's him. Tommy's eyes lit up. The antiques shop? That place is like a museum. Think, we'll find the locket there? Perhaps not the locket itself, Miss Marple said, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders, but a clue to its whereabouts. The letters suggest Eleanor Grayson hid something in the crypt, and a key may be needed to find it. Let's be off. The walk to Pym's Antiques was a short one, the village waking slowly under the lifting mist. The shop, tucked between the butcher and the post office, was a treasure trove of oddities, brass candlesticks, chipped teapots, and faded tapestry spilling from every corner. Mr. Pym, a wiry man with spectacles perched on his nose, greeted them with a nod, his hands busy polishing a silver candelabra. Miss Marple, young Tommy, he said, his voice warm but tinged with curiosity. What brings you to my dusty corner today? Miss Marple produced the photograph of Eleanor Grayson, the locket gleaming at her throat. Mr. Pym, we're chasing a bit of village history. This locket, have you seen anything like it? Or perhaps a key that might be connected? Mr. Pym adjusted his spectacles, studying the photograph with a frown. That's a fine piece, silver with fine engravings. Not common work. He paused, his eyes flickering with recognition. Come to think of it, I did come across something similar a few years back. A key, oddly shaped, with initials carved into it. Let me check the back. He shuffled to a cluttered storeroom, returning with a small wooden box. Inside, nestled, on faded velvet, was a brass key, its head engraved with the initials E.G., the same as on the photograph, and the manners chest. The key's shaft was intricately twisted, like a vine wrapping around itself, and its weight suggested it unlocked something more substantial than a diary dot. Miss Marple's heart quickened. Where did you find this, Mr. Pym? The shopkeeper scratched his chin. Bought it off a traveler passing through, 5 years ago. Said it came from an estate sale, though he wouldn't say whose. I kept it because it's unusual too fine for a common lock. Thought it might be Grayson or Thorn, given the initials, but no one claimed it. Tommy leaned forward, his voice eager. Grayson or Thorn? That's exactly what we're looking into. Any stories about them and a locket? Mr. Pym's eyes twinkled, sensing a tale worth telling. Oh, there's always stories about those two families. Back in the 1920s, they were at each other's throats over a parcel of land near the river. Word was a Grayson girl, Eleanor, I believe, fell for a Thorn boy, caused a right scandal. Some say they planned to elope, but something went wrong. The girl vanished, and the Thorns were ruined soon after. Folks whispered about a locket that held proof of some wrongdoing, but it's just gossip. Miss Marple's fingers tightened around the key. Gossip often has a grain of truth, Mr. Pym. May we borrow this key? I promise to return it. Mr. Pym hesitated, then nodded. Mind you do, Miss Marple. That key's got history, even if I don't know the half of it. As they left the shop, the key tucked safely in Miss Marple's handbag, Tommy glanced over his shoulder. Aunt Jane, did you see that bloke across the street? Tall, dark coat, just standing there. Same one from the green, I bet. Miss Marple followed his gaze, catching a glimpse of a figure slipping into an alley. I saw him, Tommy. Let's keep our wits about us. Someone's awfully interested in our little adventure." They made their way back to Haverford Manor, the key a tantalizing clue to the locket's hiding place. Miss Marple's mind churned with possibilities. The letters had mentioned the church, crypt, but the Manor's secret passage and chest suggested the Graysons had more to hide. If the key fit the chest, they might find further clues, or the locket itself. The butler, Hargraves, greeted them with his usual stiffness, but Lady Grayson was less welcoming. She met them in the foyer, her lavender dress replaced by a severe black gown, her expression icy. "Miss Marple, I thought our conversation yesterday was clear. Why are you here again?" Miss Marple's smile was unshakable. "I do apologize, Lady Grayson, but we've found something that might belong to your family, a key, possibly tied to Eleanor Grayson. I thought you'd want to see it before we explore further." Lady Grayson's eyes flicked to the key as Miss Marple held it up, and for a moment fear flashed across her face. "That's nothing of ours," she said, her voice tight. "You're wasting your time." Tommy, emboldened by Miss Marple's calm, piped up. "But it's got Eleanor's initials, and we know about the secret passage. Maybe this key opens something else in there." Lady Grayson's composure cracked, her hands clenching. "You've been poking about in places you don't belong. That passage is private, and I won't have you stirring up old nonsense." Miss Marple tilted her head, her voice gentle but probing. "Old nonsense, Lady Grayson, or a truth someone's gone to great lengths to bury. We only want to understand Eleanor's story. Surely you'd like that too?" The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the tick of a grandfather clock. Lady Grayson's shoulders sagged slightly, as if the weight of secrets pressed against her. "Very well," she said at last. "If you must, check the passage, but you'll find nothing but dust and ghosts." She led them to the oak bookcase, her movements reluctant. The secret passage opened with a groan, and Miss Marple descended the stone stairs, Tommy's torch lighting the way. The chest still stood in the center of the chamber, its rose and thorn carving glinting in the beam. Miss Marple inserted the key, her breath catching as it turned smoothly in the lock. The lid creaked open, revealing not the locket, but a leather-bound packet of letters, different from the ones they'd found before. These were written in Eleanor's hand, addressed to Charles Thorne, and filled with anguish. "They know, Charles," one read. "My brother threatens to ruin you. The locket holds our vow, but I've hidden it where they'll never look. Meet me at the crypt, and we'll be free." Miss Marple's eyes scanned the page, landing on a single line. "The key unlocks more than a chest. It opens the heart of our truth." She frowned, turning the key over in her hand. "Tommy, this key isn't for the chest alone. It's for something in the crypt." Tommy's voice was hushed. "You think the locket's there, hidden by Eleanor?" "I think it's likely," Miss Marple said, closing the chest. "But we must be cautious. Someone's watching, and they know we're close." As they emerged from the passage, Lady Grayson stood waiting, her face unreadable. "Satisfied?" she asked, her tone clipped. "For now," Miss Marple said, her smile polite but firm. "Thank you for your patience, Lady Grayson. We'll trouble you no further today." Outside, the Manor's shadow stretched long across the lawn, and Tommy shivered. "She's scared, Aunt Jane, scared of what we'll find." "Or what we'll uncover," Miss Marple said, her eyes on the horizon where the church spire pierced the sky. The crypt was next, and with it the promise of the locket and its stark truth. But the watcher's presence loomed, a silent warning that the past was not ready to yield its secrets without a fight. Chapter 5. Secrets Beneath the Stones. The evening air in St. Mary. Mead carried a chill as Miss Marple and Tommy Beresford approached the ancient church, its spire cutting a stark silhouette against the twilight sky. The cryptic map, the love letters from Haverford Manor, and the ornate brass key with E.G. initials weighed heavily in Miss Marple's handbag, each a piece of the puzzle leading to the silver locket and its promised stark truth. The letters from Eleanor Grayson to Charles Thorne had pointed them here, to the church crypt, with a cryptic note about a hidden truth locked away where none would dare to look. But the shadow of the mysterious watcher glimpsed again. Near the manor hung over their quest like a storm cloud, urging caution. Miss Marple adjusted her shawl, her eyes scanning the churchyard's weathered gravestones. "Tommy, we must be discreet," she said softly, her voice barely above the rustle of leaves. "The crypt is old, and its secrets older still. Whoever's watching us knows we're close." Tommy nodded, his torch clutched tightly, its beam flickering as he tested it. "Think the locket's really down there, Aunt Jane? Or maybe another clue?" "Either way," Miss Marple replied, "the crypt holds answers. Eleanor's letters were clear. She hid something there to protect her love for Charles. We'll need our wits about us." The church door creaked as they entered, the scent of wax and damp stone enveloping them. The vicar, Mr. Clement, was absent, leaving the nave silent save for the faint drip of a leaking roof. Miss Marple led the way to a side chapel where a heavy iron grate marked the entrance to the crypt. The grate was padlocked, its chain rusted but sturdy. She produced the brass key, its vine-like design glinting in the torchlight. "Moment of truth," Tommy whispered, his breath visible in the cool air. Miss Marple inserted the key, expecting resistance, but it turned with a smooth click. The padlock fell away, and Tommy heaved the grate open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The air was thick with the musty scent of centuries, and each step echoed with a hollow thud. The crypt was a maze of stone vaults, their arches carved with faded Latin inscriptions. Sarcophagi lined the walls, their lids etched with names long forgotten by the village above. Miss Marple's torch swept the chamber, landing on a central slab engraved with a single word, Veritas, truth. Her heart quickened. "Tommy here," she said, pointing to the slab. "This is no coincidence." Tommy knelt beside it, running his fingers along the edges. "It's loose, Aunt Jane, like it's been moved before." He pushed, and the slab shifted slightly, revealing a narrow gap. With effort they slid it aside, exposing a small compartment carved into the stone. Inside lay a leather pouch, its surface cracked with age. Miss Marple opened it carefully, revealing a tiny diary, its pages yellowed but intact. She flipped it open, her eyes scanning Eleanor's delicate handwriting. The diary was a chronicle of her secret romance with Charles Thorne, detailing clandestine meetings by the river and the wrath of her brother, William Grayson, who vowed to destroy the Thornes to protect the family's land. One entry stood out. "The locket holds the deed, signed in secret, proving the land is rightfully Charles's. I've hidden it here, beneath the stone of truth, where only the brave will find it." Miss Marple's breath caught. A deed She murmured. The locket contains proof of ownership, a truth that could rewrite the Grayson-Thorne feud. Tommy's eyes widened. So the locket's here? In the crypt? Miss Marple shook her head, scanning the diary's final pages. No, Eleanor was cleverer than that. She says the locket is where the light meets the shadow. The crypt was a decoy, a place to hide this diary. The locket is elsewhere, but this tells us why it matters. As she spoke, a faint scrape echoed from the staircase. Tommy froze, his torch swinging toward the sound. "Someone's here," he whispered, "that miss." Marple tucked the diary into her handbag, her voice calm but urgent. "Stay close, Tommy, and dim the light." They pressed against the wall, the torch reduced to a faint glow. Footsteps descended, slow and deliberate, accompanied by the rustle of fabric. A figure emerged into the crypt, cloaked in a dark coat, their face obscured by a scarf. The watcher. Miss Marple's heart pounded, but her mind remained sharp. She gestured for Tommy to stay silent, her eyes tracking the figure as they moved toward the open slab. The watcher knelt, their gloved hands probing the empty compartment. A low curse escaped them, muffled by the scarf. Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice steady. "Looking for something?" The figure spun, their eyes glinting in the dim light. For a moment silence hung heavy, then they bolted for the stairs. Tommy lunged after them, but Miss Marple caught his arm. "Let them go, dear. We have what they wanted." Tommy's face was flushed with adrenaline. Who was that? They knew about the diary. "Someone who's been watching our every move," Miss Marple said, her eyes narrowing. "And someone who fears what the locket will reveal." They climbed the stairs, securing the grate behind them. Outside, the churchyard was empty. The watcher vanished into the night. Miss Marple clutched her handbag, the diary's weight a reminder of the stakes. The locket held a deed, a legal document that could append the Grayson family's wealth and restore the Thornes' legacy. But where was it? The diary's clue, where the light meets the shadow, was maddeningly vague. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple spread the diary and map on her table, Tommy hovering eagerly. "Any ideas, Aunt Jane?" "Light meets the shadow. Sounds like poetry, not a place." Miss Marple's fingers traced the map's symbols, her mind sifting through village landmarks. Eleanor was careful, Tommy. She chose a place symbolic yet hidden. The church is too obvious, but perhaps somewhere nearby, where light and shadow play together. Tommy snapped his fingers. "The old sundial by the vicarage garden. It's got that big stone base, and the sun casts shadows on it all day." "Light and shadow, right?" Miss Marple's eyes lit up. "Clever boy. The sundial is ancient, like the oak, and it's near the church where Eleanor met Charles. We'll check it tomorrow at noon when the shadows are sharpest." As Tommy left, Miss Marple sat by her fire, the diary open in her lap. Eleanor's. Words painted a vivid picture of a woman torn between love and duty, risking everything to protect a truth the Graysons had buried. But the watcher's presence gnawed at her. Was it Lady Grayson's doing, or someone else with a stake in the locket's secret? The diary hinted at a betrayal, but not its nature. Had William Grayson framed the Thornes, or was there more to the story? The next morning, Miss Marple and Tommy met at the vicarage garden, the sundial standing like a silent sentinel among rose bushes. Its bronze face was weathered, but the shadow of its gnomon cut a precise line across the stone base. Miss Marple knelt, her fingers probing the base's edges. "Look for anything unusual, Tommy. A hollow, a loose stone." Tommy circled the sundial, his torch illuminating the crevices. "Here?" he called, pointing to a stone slightly askew. Together they pried it free, revealing a small cavity. Inside was a folded note, its paper brittle but intact. Miss Marple unfolded it, revealing a single line in Eleanor's hand. "The locket rests where the river sings and the willow weeps." Tommy groaned. "Another riddle? She really didn't make this easy." Miss Marple smiled undaunted. Eleanor was protecting something precious. "The river runs behind the Thorne estate, and there's a willow grove there. That's our next stop." As they left the garden, Miss Marple glanced back, her eyes catching a flicker of movement in the churchyard. The watcher again, or her imagination? She said nothing to Tommy, not wanting to alarm him, but her resolve hardened. The locket was close, and with it a truth that someone was desperate to keep buried. The river and the willow awaited, and Miss Marple was ready to face whatever secrets they held. Chapter 6. The Stranger's Warning. The twilight air in St. Mary Mead was thick with the scent of damp earth and fading roses as Miss Marple and Tommy Beresford emerged from the churchyard, the cryptic note from the sundial clutched in Miss Marple's gloved hand. The words, penned in Eleanor Grayson's delicate script, "The locket rests where the river sings and the willow weeps," pointed to the willow grove behind the Thorne estate, a place steeped in village lore and the echoes of a long-buried scandal. The tiny diary from the crypt, safely tucked in Miss Marple's handbag alongside the map, key and love letters, had revealed the locket's significance, a deed proving the Thornes' rightful claim to disputed land, a truth that threatened the Grayson family's legacy. But the shadowy figure who had startled them in the crypt, fleeing into the night, cast a pall over their quest. Someone was watching, and their pursuit of the locket was no longer a quiet treasure hunt. Miss Marple paused at the church gate, her eyes scanning the lengthening shadows. "Tommy, we must tread carefully," she said, her voice low but steady. "That stranger in the crypt knew exactly what we were after. They're not just curious, they're desperate." Tommy adjusted his cap, his torch swinging nervously in his hand. "You think they'll try to stop us? I mean, it's just an old locket, right?" "Not just a locket, dear," Miss Marple replied, her gaze distant. "It's a key to a truth someone wants buried. The willow grove's our next step, but we'll need to be clever about it." As they stepped onto the cobbled path leading back to the village square, a figure emerged from the hedgerow, blocking their way. Tall and cloaked in a dark coat, their face was half hidden by a woolen scarf, but their eyes gleamed with intensity. Miss Marple's heart quickened, though her expression remained serene. Tommy tensed, stepping protectively in front of her. "Miss Marple," the figure said, their voice low and gravelly, unmistakably male. "You're meddling in dangerous waters. The locket's not worth your trouble. Leave it be, or you'll regret it." Miss Marple tilted her head, her voice calm but edged with steel. "And who might you be to warn me off a bit of village history? I'm only trying to right an old wrong." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "Some wrongs are better left buried. You've got the diary, the letters enough to stir up trouble. Stop now, or you'll bring grief to more than just yourself." Tommy bristled, his fists clenching. "You can't just threaten us. Who are you, anyway?" The stranger ignored him, their gaze fixed on Miss Marple. You're clever, old lady. Too clever. But cleverness won't protect you from what's coming." With that they turned and melted into the shadows, their footsteps fading into the rustle of leaves. Tommy exhaled, his voice shaky. "Blimey, Aunt Jane, that was creepy. Think it's the same person from the crypt?" "Almost certainly," Miss Marple said, her mind racing. The voice had sparked a memory gruff with a faint lilt she'd heard before, years ago, in the village. "And I believe I know who he is. Come, Tommy, we've work to do before we visit the Willow Grove." Back at her cottage, Miss Marple lit a lamp and spread her findings on the table: the map, the diary, the letters, and the sundial's note. The stranger's warning echoed in her mind, but it only sharpened her resolve. She recognized that voice Jacob Harrow, a former gardener at Haverford Manor, dismissed a decade ago for theft, though the charges were murky. Rumor had it he'd been loyal to the Thorns, his mother having served their household before their fall. If Jacob was involved, the locket's secret was more volatile than she'd imagined. "Tommy," she said, pouring tea, "we need to learn more about Jacob Harrow. He's no ordinary prowler. If he's warning us off, he knows what the locket holds and why it matters." Tommy frowned, sipping his tea. "Jacob Harrow? The old gardener? I thought he left the village after the manor sacked him." "So did I," Miss Marple said, her knitting needles clicking softly. "But men like Jacob don't vanish, they simmer. We'll visit Mrs. Tuttle tomorrow. She was housekeeper at the Thorne estate before it crumbled. If anyone knows Jacob's connection to this, it's her." The next morning the village bustled, with its usual rhythm carts rattling, children laughing, the bakery's warm aroma drifting through the air. Miss Marple and Tommy made their way to Mrs. Tuttle's cottage, a modest dwelling tucked behind the blacksmith's forge. Mrs. Tuttle, a stout woman with a sharp tongue and sharper memory, welcomed them with a tray of scones and a suspicious squint. "Miss Marple, young Tommy," she said, wiping floury hands on her apron. "What's this about? You're not here for my scones, I wager." Miss Marple smiled, setting her handbag on the table. "You're too perceptive, Mrs. Tuttle. We're looking into an old village matter, Eleanor Grayson and Charles Thorne. We've heard Jacob Harrow might be involved. You knew him, didn't you, from your time with the Thornes?" Mrs. Tuttle's face tightened, her eyes darting to the window. "Jacob Harrow? Trouble, that one. Worked at the manor, but his heart was with the Thornes. His mother, Mary, was my best friend-mate to old Mr. Thorne. When the family fell, Jacob took it hard, blamed the Graysons, swore they'd cheated his people out of their land." Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice gentle. "And did he ever mention a locket? Or anything about Eleanor and Charles?" Mrs. Tuttle hesitated, then sighed. "Not directly, but Mary used to talk about a silver locket Charles gave Eleanor, a love token, she called it. Said it held something important, something the Graysons wanted gone. Jacob was just a boy then, but he heard the stories. When he got sacked from the manor, he came to me ranting about justice for the Thornes. Said he'd find proof one day. I told him to let it. Go old feuds don't bring back the past." Tommy's eyes widened. "Proof? Like a deed? We found a diary saying the locket holds a deed to the Thorne land." Mrs. Tuttle's hand froze on her teacup. "A deed? Lord, if that's true, no wonder Jacob's lurking about. He'd do anything to right that wrong. But be careful, Miss Marple. He's not the young lad I knew. He's bitter, and bitterness makes men dangerous. As they left Mrs. Tuttle's, Miss Marple's mind churned. Jacob Harrow's warning, his connection to the thorns, and the locket's deed painted a picture of a man driven by vengeance. But why warn her off? Was he protecting the locket or ensuring it stayed hidden? The willow grove beckoned, but first she needed to confirm Jacob's movements. They headed to the village pub, the Black Boar, where gossip flowed as freely as ale. The landlord, Mr. Gibbs, was polishing glasses when they entered, his ruddy face breaking into a grin. "Miss Marple, not often we see you here. What's the occasion?" "Just a bit of local history, Mr. Gibbs," she said, settling at a corner table. "Have you seen Jacob Harrow lately?" "I heard he's back in the village." Mr. Gibbs's grin faded. "Jacob? Aye, he was in last week, nursing a pint and muttering to himself. Looked rough, wild eyes, like he hadn't slept. Asked me if anyone was poking around the old Thorn estate. I told him to leave the past alone, but he just laughed. Said something about settling scores." Miss Marple exchanged a glance. "With Tommy. Did he mention a locket or the Graysons?" "Not a word," Mr. Gibbs said, leaning closer. But he was clutching an old photograph, one of those fancy ones from way back. "Wouldn't let me see it. Seemed personal." As they left the pub, Tommy whispered, "A photograph? Like the one we found? Think he's got one too?" "Possibly," Miss Marple said, her mind racing. "Or something else tied to Eleanor and Charles. We need to reach the Willow Grove before he does." That afternoon they trekked to the Thorn estate, its crumbling walls overgrown with ivy. The river ran behind it, its current singing softly against the rocks. The Willow Grove, a cluster of drooping trees, stood like mourners at the water's edge. Miss Marple studied the note again, where the river sings and the willow weeps. The largest willow, its branches trailing into the water, seemed the most likely spot. Tommy scouted the base, his hands probing the roots. "Aunt Jane, look." He pointed to a hollow beneath the tree, partially hidden by moss. Inside was a small tin, its surface rusted but intact. Miss Marple opened it, revealing a single-page sketch of the locket, its vine design unmistakable, with a note scrawled beside it, "Beneath the bridge where shadows dance." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. The old stone bridge, where the river narrows, that's where Eleanor hid the locket. Before they could move, a twig snapped behind them. Jacob Harrow stepped from the trees, his scarf gone, revealing a weathered face and eyes burning with purpose. "You're too late, Miss Marple," he said, his voice low. "I've been searching for years. That locket belongs to the Thorns, and I'll have it." Miss Marple stood her ground, her voice calm. "Jacob, we want the same thing justice for the Thorns. But threats and shadows won't help. Tell me what you know, and we'll find it together." Jacob hesitated, his fists unclenching slightly. "You don't understand. The Graysons ruined my family. That locket's my proof, the deed to our land. I won't let you hand it to them." "I have no intention of handing it to anyone," Miss Marple said. "But if you know where the bridge hides it, help us. Let's end this feud." Jacob's eyes flickered with doubt, then hardened. "The bridge is a trap. Eleanor was clever. She'd never make it that easy. You've got the sketch, but you're missing the real clue." He turned and vanished into the grove, leaving Miss Marple and Tommy staring after him. Tommy clutched the tin. "What now, Aunt Jane? He's not going to stop." Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile. "Nor are we, Tommy. The bridge is our next step, but Jacob's words suggest we've overlooked something. Let's return home and study the sketch. The locket's close, and we'll find it before he does." That night, as Miss Marple sat by her fire, the sketch and note spread before her, an ominous creak came from her porch. She peered through the curtains, catching a glimpse of an envelope slid under her door. She opened it, revealing a single line in a rough hand, "Beware the locket's truth." Her heart steadied, but her resolve grew. The bridge awaited, and with it the final piece of Eleanor's puzzle. Chapter 7. The Village Festival. The morning of St. Mary Mead's annual festival dawned bright and crisp, with the village green transformed into a kaleidoscope of color and sound. Stalls draped in bunting lined the cobbled paths, offering everything from homemade jams to knitted scarves, while the air hummed with the laughter of children and the lively strains of a fiddler's tune. Miss Marple, her handbag heavier with the weight of the cryptic sketch, the diary, the love letters, and the ominous note, "Beware the locket's truth," walked arm in arm with Tommy Beresford, her eyes sharp beneath the brim of her best Sunday hat. The festival was the perfect cover to gather whispers about the Thorne family and the locket, especially after Jacob Harrow's confrontation in the Willow Grove. His words hinting that the old stone bridge was a trap had left Miss Marple wary but undeterred. The sketch's clue, beneath the bridge, where shadows dance, pointed to the river, but Jacob's cryptic warning suggested a deeper layer to Eleanor Grayson's puzzle. "Tommy, keep your eyes open," Miss Marple said softly, her voice nearly lost in the chatter of the crowd. "Festivals loosen tongues, and someone here knows more about the Thornes than they've let on. But we must be subtle." Tommy grinned, his cap tilted at a jaunty angle. "Subtle's my middle name, Aunt Jane. Think we'll spot that Harrow." "Bloke again? He gave me the creeps yesterday." Miss Marple's lips twitched. "Jacob Harrow is likely watching, dear, but he'll keep his distance in this crowd. Let's focus on the Thornes. Their name keeps surfacing, and I suspect the locket's deed is tied to their ruin." They wove through the stalls, pausing to admire a display of embroidered linens. Miss Marple's keen eyes scanned the faces around them. Mrs. Price from the bakery doling out scones, Mr. Hodgins, the milkman, juggling bottles for a children's game, and a gaggle of village elders gossiping near the tea-tat. The festival was a tapestry of St. Mary Mead's life, but beneath its cheer old grudges and secrets simmered. Miss Marple's goal was to find a thread to pull, one that would lead to the locket's hiding-place dot at a stall selling trinkets. Miss Marple paused, her gaze drawn to a small silver pendant, gleaming among tarnished brooches. Its design vines curling around a central gem mirrored the locket in Eleanor Grayson's photograph. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the familiar pattern. "How curious," she murmured, catching the stall-holder's eye. "Where did you get this, Mrs. Langley?" Mrs. Langley, a wiry woman with a penchant for shiny things, beamed. "Oh, that's a pretty piece, ain't it? Found it in a box of odds and ends from an estate sale Thorne estate, I reckon, years back when they cleared the place out. Thought it was just a bauble, but it's got a nice look." Miss Marple's heart quickened, though her smile remained. "Serene, the Thorne estate? How fascinating. Do you know anything about their history? I have heard tales of a locket tied to their troubles." Mrs. Langley leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Oh, the Thorns were grand once, till the Graysons did 'em in. Word was, a Grayson stole a locket from a Thorn. Girl Eleanor, they called her back in the 20s. Had proof of something naughty, it did. Land, maybe, or a secret marriage. My Gran said the Thorns were cheated out of their rights, and that locket was the key. Never found it, though. Tommy, pretending to examine a brass candlestick, piped up. Sounds like a proper mystery. Anyone else talk about it? Mrs. Langley glanced around, then nodded toward the tea tent. Old Mrs. Carter, over there. She's 90 if she's a day, and her memory's sharper than a tack. Worked as a maid for the Thorns before they fell. Ask her, but mind she's prickly. Miss Marple thanked Mrs. Langley, slipping the pendant into her handbag. It wasn't. The locket, its clasp was too modern, its weight too light, but it was a clue, a replica perhaps, or a decoy crafted to mislead. As they approached the tea tent, the crowd parted, revealing Mrs. Carter seated like a queen in a wicker chair, her white hair pinned tightly, her eyes glinting with the sharpness of youth. Miss Marple, Mrs. Carter said, her voice crackling like dry leaves. I see you sniffing about old secrets. What's it this time? Miss Marple settled beside her, offering a jam tart from her basket. You've always had a keen eye, Mrs. Carter. I'm curious about the Thorns, particularly a locket tied. To Eleanor Grayson and Charles Thorn. You were with the Thorns back then, weren't you? Mrs. Carter's lips pursed, her fingers curling around the tart. I was a maid in 22, when the world was kinder to the Thorns. Eleanor Grayson was a sweet thing, head over heels for Charles. They'd meet by the river, under the willows, thinking no one saw, but her brother William Grayson got wind of it. Nasty piece of work, that one. Spread lies that Charles stole. A deed to the river land ruined the Thorns' name. I heard tell of a locket Eleanor wore, silver with vines, holding proof the land was theirs. Never saw it myself, but Charles swore he'd find it before he left the village. Miss Marple's. Pulse quickened. Left the village? Charles didn't stay? Mrs. Carter shook her head. Vanished autumn of 23. Some say he ran off, heartbroken. Others say William Grayson had him chased out, or worse. The locket disappeared with him, or so we thought. But you've got that look, Miss Marple. Found something, haven't you? Miss Marple produced the pendant, watching Mrs. Carter's reaction. This was at Mrs. Langley's stall from the Thorn estate. It's not the locket, but it's close. Do you think it's a copy? Mrs. Carter squinted, her fingers trembling as she touched the pendant. Aye, it's a fake. The real one had a sapphire, not this cheap glass. Someone made this to throw folks off. William Grayson, I'd wager he was sly like that. Tommy leaned in, his voice low. So the real locket's still out there. By the bridge, maybe? Mrs. Carter's eyes narrowed. Bridge? That old stone heap? Charles and Eleanor met there sometimes, but it's a fool's errand to look there. Too obvious. Eleanor was cleverer. She'd hide it where no Grayson would. Think to look. Miss Marple tucked the pendant away, her mind racing. The sketch's clue pointed to the bridge, but Mrs. Carter's words echoed Jacob Harrow's warning. A trap. Was the locket truly there, or was Eleanor's riddle leading them elsewhere? As they thanked Mrs. Carter and moved through the festival, Miss Marple noticed a figure lingering near the fiddler's stage-tall, dark-coated scarf pulled high. Jacob Harrow watching them again. Tommy, don't look. she whispered, steering him toward a lemonade stall. "He's here, and he's—" Bold to show himself in daylight, Tommy's jaw tightened. "What's his game? If he wants the locket, why not just take it?" "He doesn't know where it is," Miss Marple said, paying for 2 lemonades. "But he knows we're close. Let's keep moving blend with the crowd." They joined a group watching a tug-of-war, the village's young men laughing as they pulled the rope. Miss Marple's eyes, however, were on the edges of the green, where Jacob's figure slipped between stalls. She needed more information, something to connect the bridge, the locket, and Jacob's motives. Spotting Mr. Gibbs, the pub landlord, overseeing a pie-eating contest, she approached with a smile. "Mr. Gibbs, what a splendid festival," she said, offering a tart. "I was just chatting with Mrs. Carter about the old Thorne-Grayson feud. She mentioned a locket tied to a deed. Ever hear such tales at the Black Boar?" Mr. Gibbs wiped his hands on his apron, chuckling. "Plenty of tales, Miss Marple. The Thorns were a sore subject back in the day. Old regulars used to say Charles Thorne hid something by the river before he left something to prove the Graysons cheated his family. A locket, maybe? Jacob Harrow was in a few months back asking about the same thing. Seemed obsessed, kept muttering about making things right." Miss Marple's heart skipped. "Jacob asked about the locket? Did he say where he thought it was?" Mr. Gibbs shook his head. "Not a word, but he was sketching something looked like the bridge, with those willows nearby. Said he'd been digging around, but found nothing but mud." As they moved on, Tommy whispered, "He's been to the bridge already? Then why warn us it's a trap?" Miss Marple's lips pursed. "Either he's lying to throw us off, or he knows something we don't. The sketch says beneath, 'The bridge,' but Eleanor's riddles are layered. We need to see it for ourselves." The festival continued, with children dancing around a maypole and villagers bartering over homemade goods. Miss Marple and Tommy slipped away as dusk fell, the river's soft gurgle guiding them to the old stone bridge. Its arches, moss-covered and ancient, cast dancing shadows on the water below. The sketch's clue replayed in Miss Marple's mind, "Where shadows dance." They searched the bridge's base, Tommy's torch illuminating the crevices. Beneath one arch, half buried in silt, was a loose stone. Tommy pried it free, revealing a small, rusted box. Miss Marple opened it, her breath catching as she found a single item, a silver ring, engraved with the same vine pattern as the locket. A note inside, in Eleanor's hand, read, "The locket waits where the heart of the village beats." Tommy groaned. "Another riddle? Aunt Jane, she's driving me mad." Miss Marple smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger. "Patience, Tommy. The heart of the village could be the clock tower. It's central, and its chimes are St. Mary Mead's pulse. But this ring, it's a promise, a token of Eleanor and Charles's love. We're closer than ever." As they stood, a shadow moved across the bridge. Jacob Harrow, his scarf lowered, stared down at them, his face a mix of fury and desperation. "You're too stubborn, Miss Marple," he called, his voice carrying over the water. "That ring's nothing. The locket's mine by right, Miss." Marple met his gaze, unflinching. "Then help us, Jacob. If the locket holds justice for the Thorns, we're on the same side." He hesitated, then shook his head. "You don't know what you're stirring up. Walk away, or you'll wish you had." He vanished into the night, Leaving the river's song to fill the silence, Miss Marple and Tommy returned to her cottage, the ring and note joining the growing collection of clues. The clock tower loomed in her mind, its steady ticks a promise of answers. But Jacob's warnings, the festival's whispers, and the replica pendant painted a complex picture. The locket was near, its truth sharper than ever, and Miss Marple was ready to face the heart of the village and the secrets it held. Chapter 8. The Thorn Legacy. The dawn light filtered through the lace curtains of Miss Marple's cottage, casting delicate patterns across the table where she sat, surrounded by the relics of her quest, the cryptic map, Eleanor Grayson's diary, the love letters, the vine-engraved ring, and the latest note, its words etched in her mind. The locket waits where the heart of the village beats. The clock tower, St. Mary Mead's pulsing center, loomed as the next destination in her search for the silver locket and its hidden deed, a document that could restore the Thorn family's lost legacy and unravel the Graysons' long-held secrets. But Jacob Harrow's ominous presence at the festival, his desperate warnings, and the replica pendant found among the stalls suggested the locket's truth was a spark in a powder keg of village history. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes tracing the ring's intricate design. It was no mere trinket. Its craftsmanship echoed the locket's, a symbol of Eleanor and Charles Thorne's forbidden love. The festival had yielded vital clues, Mrs. Carter's tales of the Grayson-Thorne feud, the fake pendant, and Jacob's fixation on the locket's justice. Yet the note's reference to the clock tower felt too direct, too exposed for Eleanor's cunning. Miss Marple suspected another layer to the riddle, and the dilapidated Thorne estate, where whispers of the family's ruin lingered, was the logical place to seek answers. A knock at the door heralded Tommy Beresford's arrival. His sandy hair tousled from the morning breeze, his satchel slung over one shoulder. "Morning, Aunt Jane," he said, bounding in with his usual energy. "Ready to storm the clock tower? Bet the locket's hidden in the gears or something." "Miss?" Marple smiled, offering him a biscuit. "Patience, Tommy. The clock tower may be the heart of the village, but Eleanor was too clever to hide the locket in so obvious a place. We need to understand the Thorne side of the story first. Clara Thorne, the last of their line, lives at the old estate. She may know more than she lets on." Tommy's eyes widened. "The Thorne place? It's practically a ruined, creepy old house, all vines and broken windows. Think she'd talk to us?" "She may, if we approach her kindly," Miss Marple sighed, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. "Clara's lived in the shadow of her family's fall. If the locket holds the deed to their land, she has a stake in its recovery. But we must be cautious. Jacob Harrow's warnings suggest someone else is watching her too." They set off through St. Mary Mead, the village still buzzing from the festival's afterglow. The path to the Thorne estate wound past fields of grazing sheep, the air heavy with the scent of cut hay. The estate itself was a ghost of its former glory, its once grand facade crumbling under ivy's chokehold, its windows dark and cracked. The iron gate hung askew, creaking as Tommy pushed it open. "Spooky," he muttered, glancing at the overgrown garden. "Like something out of a ghost story." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Ghosts are just stories, dear, but secrets? Those are real, and this house is full of them." They knocked on the weathered door, its paint peeling like old skin. After a long pause, it opened to reveal Clara Thorne, a slight woman in her 60s, her hair a silver cascade, her eyes sharp but weary. She wore a faded dress, its elegance a remnant of better days. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice cool but curious, "and young Beresford, what brings you to this forgotten place?" "Miss." Marple offered a small basket of scones, her smile disarming. "A neighborly visit, Miss Thorne, and a bit of curiosity about your family's history. We've come across some items, an old ring, letters that suggest a locket tied to the Thornes and Graysons. May we speak with you?" Clara's expression flickered, a mix of suspicion and intrigue. "You're chasing that old tale, aren't you? The locket and the land? Come in, but don't expect me to open old wounds easily." The parlor was a time capsule of faded grandeur, dusty chandeliers, moth-eaten curtains, and a portrait of a stern-faced Thorne ancestor above the mantel. Clara served tea and chipped porcelain, her movements precise but guarded. "So, she," said, settling into a worn armchair, "what have you found? And why dig up my family's ghosts?" Miss Marple produced the ring, its vine pattern catching the dim light. "This was found near the river, with a note suggesting the locket is hidden where the village's heart beats. We believe it holds a deed proving your family's claim to the river land. Does this ring mean anything to you?" Clara's fingers trembled as she took the ring, her eyes softening. It was my great-uncle Charles's. He gave it to Eleanor Grayson as a promise. My grandmother told me about it, a matching set with the locket, meant to seal their love. But William Grayson, Eleanor's brother, ruined everything. He framed Charles for theft, claimed he stole the deed to our land. The locket, they said, held the truth, but it vanished when Charles did. Tommy leaned forward, his voice eager. "Vanished? So you don't know where it is?" Clara's lips tightened. "If I did, I wouldn't be living in this wreck. The Graysons took everything, our land, our name. My grandmother swore the locket was hidden to protect the deed, but she never found it. She thought Eleanor hid it somewhere, only Charles would know." Miss Marple's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. "The note mentions the clock tower, but we've reason to believe it's a misdirection. Your family's estate was. There a place Charles and Eleanor favored? Somewhere private?" Clara hesitated, her eyes drifting to the window. "The old library. Charles loved it, said. It was where he and Eleanor planned their future. It's a ruin now, but there's a hidden drawer in the desk. My grandmother showed me once," said Charles, "kept his secrets there." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. "May we see it?" Clara led them through the creaking house, past rooms shrouded in dust sheets, to a library where shelves sagged under moldering books. The desk, a heavy oak relic, stood by a cracked window, overlooking the river. Clara knelt, her fingers probing beneath the desktop until a soft click revealed a hidden drawer. Inside was a single-item sketch of the locket, its vine design identical to the ring, with a note in Charles's bold hand. "The locket lies where time stands still." Tommy's eyes lit up. "The clock tower. If it stopped, that's where time stands still." Miss Marple frowned, her fingers tracing the sketch. "Perhaps, but Charles was as clever as Eleanor. The clock tower's too public." "Clara, does time stands still mean anything else to your family?" Clara's face clouded. "There's an old sundial in the garden, broken for years. Charles used to sit by it, sketching. He said it was where he felt closest to Eleanor. Miss Marple exchanged a glance with Tommy. The sundial in the vicarage garden had yielded a clue, but this one on Thorn Land felt more personal. "Thank you, Clara," she said, tucking the sketch into her handbag. "We'll check the sundial. If we find the locket, I promise it will serve your family's justice." As they left the house, the garden's overgrown paths led them to. The sundial, its stone base cracked, its gnomon bent. Tommy knelt, his hands searching the base. "Aunt Jane, here," he called, uncovering a loose stone. Beneath it was a small tin, its lid engraved with the thorn crest. Inside, a folded parchment detailed a secret meeting place, a hollow tree near the river, where Charles and Eleanor exchanged vows. Miss Marple's heart sank slightly. "Another step," she murmured. "The locket's not here, but we're closer." As they examined the parchment, a rustle came from the hedge. Jacob Harrow emerged, his dark coat blending with the shadows, his face etched with frustration. "You're relentless, Miss Marple," he said, his voice low. "That tree's empty. I've checked. You're chasing ghosts." Miss Marple met, his gaze unflinching. "Then why follow us, Jacob?" "If the locket's gone, what do you fear?" Jacob's jaw tightened. "I fear what you'll do with it. The Graysons will bury it again, and my family's name stays in the dirt. Leave the tree alone, it's a dead end." Tommy stepped forward, his voice bold. "If it's a dead end, why are you so worked up?" Jacob's eyes flashed, but he turned and vanished into the dusk. Miss Marple clutched the parchment, her resolve firm. The hollow tree was their next destination, but Jacob's desperation suggested he knew more than he admitted. The locket's truth was within reach, and she would not let it slip away. That evening, as Miss Marple sat by her fire, the sketch and parchment spread before her, she felt the weight of the Thorn legacy. The hollow tree, the river, the sundial, all pieces of a puzzle Eleanor and Charles had crafted to protect their love and their truth. The clock tower still loomed, but the tree called louder. Tomorrow they would search it, ready to face whatever shadows, human or otherwise, awaited. Chapter 9. The Clock Tower's Secret. The morning sun cast long shadows across St. Mary Mead, its golden rays glinting off the river that wound behind the Thorn estate. Miss Marple, her handbag heavy with the accumulated clues of her quest, the cryptic map, Eleanor Grayson's diary, the love letters, the vine-engraved ring, and the parchment from the Thorn sundial, walked purposefully toward the village center, Tommy Beresford at her side. The parchment's words in Charles Thorn's bold hand echoed in her mind. The locket lies where time stands still. Clara Thorn had pointed them to a broken sundial on her estate, which yielded the clue to a hollow tree by the river. But Miss Marple's instincts, honed by years of unraveling village secrets, tugged her toward the clock tower, the heart of the village hinted at in the previous note. Jacob Harrow's warning that the hollow tree was a dead end lingered like a shadow, urging caution, but not deterring her resolve to find the silver locket and its hidden deed, the key to righting the Thorn family's ruin. "Tommy, we're taking a detour," Miss Marple said, her voice steady despite the chill in the air. "The hollow tree may hold answers, but the clock tower has been calling since the festival. If Eleanor and Charles hid the locket where time stands still, the clock tower's stopped gears are worth a look." Tommy adjusted his satchel, his eyes bright with anticipation. "The clock tower? It's been busted for years. Vicar says it hasn't chimed since before I was born. Think the locket's up there, Aunt Jane?" "Possibly," Miss Marple replied, her gaze fixed on the spire rising above the village green. Or another piece of Eleanor's puzzle. She was clever, layering her clues like a tapestry. But Jacob's insistence that the tree is empty makes me wonder if he's trying to steer us away from the true hiding place. They reached the clock tower, a weathered stone structure at the village's heart, its face frozen at 10 minutes past 3. Ivy clung to its walls, and the wooden door at its base was locked with a rusty padlock. Miss Marple produced the brass key with E.G. initials, its vine-like design, a constant reminder of Eleanor's hand in this mystery. "Let's see if this fits," she said, inserting it into the lock. It turned with a reluctant groan, and the door creaked open, revealing a spiral staircase cloaked in dust. Tommy's torch cut through the gloom, illuminating cobwebs and cracked stone. "Creepy," he muttered, his voice echoing. "Feels like we're walking into a ghost story." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Ghosts don't bother me, dear. It's the living we must watch for." The staircase wound upward, each step groaning under their weight. At the top they entered a cramped chamber filled with rusted gears and the faint scent of oil. The clock's mechanism, frozen for decades, loomed like a silent giant, its hands visible through a grimy window. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the room, landing on a small panel in the wall, its edges slightly askew, as if recently disturbed. "Tommy there," she said, pointing. "Help me open it." Tommy pried the panel loose, revealing a hollow space. Inside was a sealed envelope, its wax seal bearing the thorn crest, a rose entwined with thorns. Miss Marple broke the seal, her fingers steady despite her racing pulse. The envelope contained a single sheet, written in Charles Thorne's hand. "To whom finds this, know that the Graysons stole our birthright. The deed lies within the locket, hidden where the river's song meets the willow's tears. Forgive us our secrecy, but truth demands sacrifice." Tommy's eyes widened. "The willow's tears? That's the hollow tree, like the parchment said, but Jacob told us it's empty." Miss Marple frowned, rereading the note. "Jacob may believe it's empty, or he's lying to protect the locket. But this note confirms the deed's importance and the Graysons' guilt. William Grayson framed Charles, and Eleanor hid the locket to preserve the truth." As she spoke, a low creak echoed from the staircase. Tommy swung his torch, catching a glint of movement below. "Someone's coming, Aunt Jane?" he whispered, his voice tight. Miss Marple tucked the envelope into her handbag, her mind racing. "Stay calm, Tommy. We're not alone in this hunt." The footsteps grew louder, deliberate, and a figure emerged into the chamber, Jacob Harrow. His dark coat dusty from the climb, his face etched with a mix of determination and exhaustion. "You don't listen, do you, Miss Marple?" he said, his voice rough. "I told you the tree's a dead end. Now you're stirring up more trouble." Miss Marple met his gaze, her composure unshaken. "And you, Jacob, seem awfully keen to keep us from it. If the tree's empty, why follow us here? What do you know about the locket?" Jacob's jaw tightened, his eyes flickering to the open panel. "I know it's my family's last chance. My mother worked herself to death for the Thorns, and the Graysons laughed while we starved. That locket holds the deed to our land they stole. I've searched every inch of that tree, and it's got nothing but rot." Tommy stepped forward, his voice bold. "Then why not help us? If we find it, we'll make sure the Thorns get what's theirs." Jacob laughed, a bitter sound. You think Lady Grayson will let that happen? She's got eyes everywhere. You're fools if you think you'll outsmart her. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Lady Grayson? Is she the one sending you to warn us off? Jacob hesitated, then shook his head. Not her. Someone else, someone who knows what the locket means. They've got me trapped, same as you. Stop now, Miss Marple, or you'll bring them down on us all. Before she could press further, a loud crack echoed through the chamber. A beam above groaned, dust raining down as it shifted. Tommy grabbed Miss Marple's arm, pulling her back as the beam crashed to the floor, blocking the staircase. Jacob cursed, diving for cover. Aunt Jane, are we trapped? Tommy's voice was steady, but his eyes were wide-dot. Miss Marple's heart pounded, but her mind remained sharp. Not yet, dear. There's a window, check it. Tommy scrambled to the grimy window, forcing it open. A narrow ledge led to a sloped roof, just wide enough to climb down. We can make it, he said, helping Miss Marple through. Jacob hesitated, then followed, his face grim. You're lucky, he muttered, but luck runs out. They descended carefully, the village spread below like a patchwork quilt. As they reached the ground, Jacob vanished into the crowd, leaving Miss Marple and Tommy breathless but unharmed. That beam didn't fall by accident, Miss Marple said, her voice low. Someone wants us out of the way. Tommy clutched his torch, his face pale. Jacob, or this someone else he mentioned? Possibly both, Miss Marple said, her eyes scanning the green. But we've got the note, and it points back to the hollow tree. We'll check it ourselves, trap or not. That afternoon they trekked to the river, the willow grove's mournful branches swaying in the breeze. The hollow tree, gnarled and ancient, stood at the water's edge, its trunk split to reveal a deep cavity. Tommy's torch illuminated the interior, but it was empty save for cobwebs and damp wood. Jacob was right, Tommy said, disappointed. Nothing here. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Eleanor was too clever for an empty hiding place. Look closer. Tommy checked the roots. Tommy knelt, digging through the soft earth. His fingers brushed something hard, a small metal box, its surface etched with the vine pattern. Miss Marple opened it, revealing a single key, smaller than the one they'd found, with CT engraved on its head. A note inside read, "The locket waits where the village sleeps." Tommy groaned. Another riddle? Where does the village sleep? Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. The old chapel, Tommy. It's been abandoned for years, a place where the village sleeps in silence. And Charles's key, this must unlock its final hiding place. As they left the grove, Miss Marple glanced back, sensing eyes in the shadows. Jacob or someone else? The chapel was their next destination, but the falling beam and Jacob's cryptic warning suggested danger was closing in. The locket's truth was within reach, and Miss Marple was ready to face whatever secrets the sleeping village held. Letter, its wax seal broken, but bearing the thorn crest. The letter, in Eleanor's hand, read, "Charles, my love, the locket is safe where the village dreams, beneath the starlight's gaze. Forgive me for the deception, the tree, the bridge, all decoys. The truth lies where we first vowed our love." Tommy's eyes widened. Where the village dreams? That's not the chapel, is it? Miss Marple frowned, rereading the letter. No, dear. The chapel was another step, a place to hide this message. Where the village dreams and starlight's gaze suggest somewhere open, under the night sky. Eleanor and Charles vowed. Their love somewhere private, romantic, a place tied to their story. Tommy snapped his fingers. The old gazebo. By the river near the Thorne estate. It's got that open roof perfect for starlight. Kids used to call it the dreamer's spot before it fell apart. Miss Marple's eyes lit up. Brilliant, Tommy. The gazebo fits perfectly. But we'll need to search it at night, when the stars are out, to follow Eleanor's clue. As they prepared to leave, a shadow flickered across the boarded windows. Tommy swung his torch, but the chapel was empty. Someone's out there, he whispered, his voice tight. Miss Marple clutched her handbag, the letter inside a burning. Wait, we've been followed again. Let's move quickly, Tommy, and tell no one where we're going. That evening, under a sky ablaze with stars, they approached the gazebo, a skeletal structure overgrown with vines, its lattice roof open. To the heavens, the river's soft song mingled with the rustle of leaves, creating an eerie symphony. Miss Marple's torch illuminated the gazebo's base, where a stone platform bore faint carvings vines, like those on the locket and ring. Tommy knelt, searching for a hidden compartment. Here, he called, finding a loose stone. Beneath. It was a small tin, its lid engraved with E.G. and C.T. entwined. Inside was a single item, a locket-shaped outline pressed into velvet, but the locket itself was gone. A note in Charles's hand read, "Taken by one we trusted. Seek the jeweler who crafted it." Miss Marple's heart sank. The locket was here, but someone's taken it. A jeweler? We need to find who made it. Tommy's face fell. All this for an empty box? Who took it, Aunt Jane? Jacob? Or someone he trusted, Miss Marple said, her mind racing. We'll need to trace the locket's origins. There's a jeweler in London who specialized in such pieces in the 20s. Tomorrow we'll take the train. As they left the gazebo, a rustle came from the trees. A figure tall, dark-coated, scarf-high watched from a distance. Miss Marple's pulse quickened, but she kept her pace steady. "Don't look, Tommy," she whispered. "We're being followed and they know we're close." The next morning they boarded the train to London, the empty tin a bitter reminder of their near-miss. Miss Marple's mind churned with questions. Who had taken the locket? Was it Jacob, the mysterious stranger, or someone else tied to the Graysons? The jeweler held the next clue, but the shadow trailing them was closing in, and the locket's truth was proving more dangerous with every step. Chapter 10. A Dangerous Pursuit. The late afternoon sun hung low over St. Mary Mead, casting a golden glow across the village as Miss Marple and Tommy Beresford made their way from the river's willow grove. Their latest discovery, a small key, engraved with C.T. and a note reading, "The locket waits where the village sleeps," adding fresh urgency to their quest for the silver locket. The key, found in a metal box beneath the hollow tree, was clearly Charles Thorne's, a companion to the one marked E.G. that had unlocked earlier clues. The note pointed to the old chapel, abandoned for decades and shrouded in village lore, a place where silence reigned and secrets slumbered. But the near disaster in the clock tower, where a falling beam had nearly trapped them, weighed heavily on Miss Marple's mind. Someone perhaps, Jacob Harrow, or the mysterious someone else he'd hinted at, was determined to stop them, and the locket's hidden deed, proof of the Thorne family's rightful claim to disputed land, was stirring dangerous currents. Miss Marple adjusted her shawl, her handbag heavier with each clue. The cryptic map, Eleanor Grayson's diary, the love letters, the vine-engraved ring, the clock tower's note, and now Charles's key. "Tommy, we must be vigilant," she said, her voice steady but low as they crossed the village green. "That beam was no accident. Someone knows we're close to the locket, and they're willing to take risks to keep it hidden." Tommy's torch swung nervously in his hand, his eyes scanning the hedgerows. "You think it was Jacob? He was right there, acting all cryptic. Or maybe Lady Grayson's got someone working for her." "Possibly," Miss Marple replied, her gaze distant. "But Jacob's desperation feels personal, tied to his family's loyalty to the Thorns. If there's another player, they're staying in the shadows. The chapel is our next step, but we'll need to tread lightly." They paused by the village post office, where Miss Marple decided to enlist an ally. Constable Barnes, a steady man, with a knack for noticing details, was inside, sorting letters. She knocked gently, her smile disarming as he looked up. "Miss Marple, young Tommy," he said, tipping his hat. "What's brought you here? Not another mystery, I hope." "Miss." Marple's eyes twinkled. "I'm afraid so, Constable. We're looking into an old matter, the Grayson-Thorne feud, and a locket that might hold a deed. We had a close call at the clock tower this morning. A beam nearly fell on us. I wonder if you've noticed anyone unusual about the village lately?" Barnes's brow furrowed. "A beam, you say? That's troubling. As for unusual, well, Jacob Harrow's been seen skulking around near the river, the church, even the Thorne estate. Folks say he's bitter about his family's ties to the Thorns. And there's been talk of a stranger, a tall chap in a dark coat, not local, asking questions about you, Miss Marple." Miss Marple's heart quickened, though her expression remained serene. A stranger? Did anyone catch a name or what he was after? Barnes shook his head, kept to himself. "Mostly. Asked old Gibbs at the pub about your comings and goings, but Gibbs didn't take to him. If you're poking into old feuds, Miss Marple, watch your back. The Graysons don't like their name dragged up." "Thank you, Constable," Miss Marple sighed, slipping him a scone from her basket. "If you hear more, let me know. We're off to the old chapel quietly, of course." As they left, Tommy whispered, "A stranger? That's not Jacob, then. Who else wants the locket?" "Someone with a stake in the deed," Miss Marple said, her mind racing. "Or someone protecting the Graysons' secrets. We'll find out soon enough." The old chapel lay on the village's edge, its stone walls crumbling under ivy's embrace, its windows boarded and dark. The villagers called it sleeping, a relic of a time when it hosted weddings and baptisms before falling into disuse. The door was ajar, its hinges rusted, and Miss Marple's key gleamed in her hand as they stepped inside. The air was heavy with dust, and the faint scent of decayed hymnals. The pews warped and splintered. Tommy's torch swept the interior, landing on a small altar at the far end, its surface carved with faded vines, a pattern eerily similar to the locket's design. "Aunt Jane, look at this," he said, pointing. "Think the key fits something here?" Miss Marple approached the altar, her fingers tracing the carvings. A faint scene suggested a hidden compartment, but the key didn't fit. Instead, she noticed a loose stone in the floor beneath the altar, its edges worn smooth. "Tommy, help me lift this," she said, kneeling despite her creaking joints. Together, they pried the stone free, revealing a small cavity. Inside was a leather pouch, its surface cracked but intact. Miss Marple opened it, her breath catching as she found a folded. Chapter 11. The jeweler's tale. The train to London rattled through the countryside, its rhythmic clatter a backdrop to Miss Marple's racing thoughts. She sat by the window, her handbag resting on her lap, its contents a testament to the twisting path of her quest. The cryptic map, Eleanor Grayson's diary, the love letters, the vine-engraved ring, the clock tower's note, Charles Thorne's key, and the empty tin from the gazebo, its note haunting her, taken by one we trusted, Seek, the jeweler who crafted it. The silver locket, holding a deed that could restore the Thorne family's lost land and expose the Graysons' betrayal, had been within reach only to slip away. Now the trail led to London, to a jeweler who might know who crafted the locket and who had taken it. But the shadow of their pursuer, glimpsed again at the gazebo, loomed large, and Miss Marple's instincts warned her that danger was closing in. Tommy Beresford, seated across from her, fidgeted with his cap, his eyes darting to the other passengers in the carriage. "Aunt Jane, you think we're being followed? That bloke in the dark coat was at the gazebo. I'm sure of it." Miss Marple's gaze remained on the passing fields, her voice low. "Quite likely, Tommy, whoever took the locket knows we're close and they're not pleased. But London's a big place harder to track us there. We'll find this jeweler and learn what we can." The train pulled into Paddington Station, the bustle of London a sharp contrast to St. Mary Mead's quiet charm. Miss Marple led the way through the crowded platform, her steps purposeful despite the city's chaos. The jeweler's name gleaned from village gossip, and a faded receipt in Eleanor's diary was Haver and Sons, a small shop in Hatton Garden, known for crafting bespoke pieces in the 1920s. The diary had mentioned a commission for a locket of vines, and Miss Marple hoped their records would reveal not only its maker, but also who might have claimed it. Hatton Garden sparkled with shop windows displaying diamonds and gold, but Haver and Sons was a modest establishment, its sign weathered but proud. Inside, the air smelled of polish and old leather, and glass cases gleamed with antique jewelry. An elderly man, his hair white and his hands steady, looked up from a workbench. "Good day," he said, his voice warm but cautious. "I'm Mr. Haver. How can I help you?" Miss Marple smiled, setting her handbag on the counter. "Mr. Haver, I'm Jane Marple, and this is my young friend, Tommy. We're researching a piece from your shop, a silver locket, crafted in the early 1920s, with a vine design and a sapphire clasp. It belonged to a woman named Eleanor Grayson, from St. Mary Mead. Do you have records of such a piece?" Mr. Haver's eyes flickered with recognition, and he adjusted his spectacles. "Eleanor Grayson, you say? That name's familiar. Let me check the ledger." He shuffled to a back room, returning with a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed but meticulously kept. Flipping to 1922, he ran a finger down the entries. "Here it is, a silver locket, vine motif, sapphire clasp, commissioned by Charles Thorne for Miss Eleanor Grayson. A love token, I recall. Fine work with a hidden compartment for a small document." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. "A document? Do you know what it was?" Mr. Haver shook his head. "Not my business to ask, but Charles was particular about the compartment's size, said it was for something vital." He collected the locket himself, paid in full. A rare piece, that one. Tommy leaned forward, his voice eager. Did anyone else come looking for it? Maybe recently? Mr. Haver's brow furrowed. Funny you should ask. About a year ago, a man came in, tall, rough sort, said he was from St. Mary Mead. Asked about the locket, claimed it was a family heirloom. I told him we don't keep track of pieces once they're sold, but he was insistent, even offered to. Buy any records I had. I sent him away, didn't like his manner. Miss Marple's mind raced. Was his name Jacob Harrow? Mr. Haver nodded slowly. That's the one. Jacob Harrow. Seemed desperate, kept muttering about justice. I haven't seen him since, but I got the sense he wasn't acting alone. Miss Marple exchanged a glance with Tommy. Jacob's involvement was no surprise, but the hint of another player added a new layer to the mystery. One more thing, Mr. Haver, she said, producing the vine-engraved ring. This was found near the locket's last known location. Was it part of the same commission? Mr. Haver examined the ring, his eyes lighting up. Indeed it was, a matching set locket for her, ring for him. Charles wanted them to symbolize their bond. The ring's simpler, but the craftsmanship is ours. Where did you find it? In St. Mary Mead, near the river, Miss Marple said, keeping her tone light. The locket was taken from its hiding place, possibly by someone Charles and Eleanor trusted. Do your records mention anyone else involved with the commission? Mr. Haver flipped through the ledger again, his finger pausing on a note. There's a mention of a third party, a woman, Miss Abigail Wren, who acted as a go-between for Charles. She collected sketches for the design, as Charles was often away. Lived in St. Mary Mead, I believe, near the old chapel. Miss Marple's heart skipped. Abigail Wren? Do you know what became of her? Mr. Haver shook his head. Not a clue. She was young then, a friend of Eleanor's, I'd wager. If she's still in your village, she might know more. As they thanked Mr. Haver and left the shop, Tommy whispered, Abigail Wren? Never heard of her. Think she's the one who took the locket? Possibly, Miss Marple said, her eyes scanning the busy street. Or she knows who did. We'll need to find her or her descendants when we return to St. Mary Mead. They made their way to a nearby tea shop to plan their next move, the city's hum a stark contrast to the village's quiet. Over tea and scones, Miss Marple spread the clues on the table, her mind piecing together the puzzle. The locket, crafted for Eleanor by Charles, held a deed, could append the Grayson family's wealth. Abigail Wren, a trusted friend, might have betrayed them, or been coerced into taking it. Jacob Harrow's desperation suggested he was searching for the same truth, but his cryptic warnings hinted at a larger force at play. As they sipped their tea, Tommy glanced out the window, his face paling. Aunt Jane, don't look now, but there's a man across the street, dark, coat, scarf high. It's him, the one from the gazebo. Miss Marple kept her gaze on her teacup, her voice calm. Don't stare, Tommy. Let's finish our tea and leave quietly. If he's followed us to London, he's more determined than I thought. They paid and stepped into the bustling street, weaving through the crowd toward the station. Miss Marple's senses were sharp, catching the faint echo of footsteps behind them. At a busy corner she paused by a newsstand, pretending to browse, and caught a glimpse of their pursuer, tall, scarf obscuring his face, but not Jacob. This man moved with a calculated grace, his eyes fixed on them. "Tommy, we're being trailed," she whispered. "When we reach the station, stay close and follow my lead." At Paddington, the crowd thickened, and Miss Marple led Tommy through a maze of platforms, doubling back to lose their follower. They boarded the train just as the whistle blew, settling into a quiet carriage. But as the train pulled away, Miss Marple glanced out the window and saw the dark-coated figure on the platform. Watching them go back in St. Mary Mead, the village was settling into evening, the air cool and fragrant with wood smoke. Miss Marple and Tommy headed to the vicarage, where Mr. Clement might know of Abigail Wren. The vicar, a kindly man with a love for local history, welcomed them into his study, its shelves lined with dusty records. "Abigail Wren?" Mr. Clement said, rubbing his chin. "The name's familiar. Let me check the parish rolls." He pulled a ledger from 1923, flipping through its pages. "Here she is, Abigail Wren, lived by the old chapel, worked as a seamstress. Died in 45, but her daughter Margaret still lives in the village. Runs a small shop on Baker Street, selling lace and such." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "Margaret Wren? She may know what her mother did with the locket." "Thank you, Mr. Clement." As they left the vicarage, the village was quiet, but Miss Marple's senses prickled. The stranger's pursuit in London had been too bold, too precise. Someone was desperate to stop them, and Margaret Wren was their last hope for answers. Tomorrow they would visit her shop, but tonight Miss Marple locked her cottage door tightly, the locket's truth closer, yet more dangerous than ever. Chapter 12. The Chapel's Revelation. The twilight sky over St. Mary Mead shimmered with the first stars, casting a soft glow on the village as Miss Marple and Tommy Beresford approached the old chapel, its crumbling stone walls bathed in the ethereal light of dusk. The weight of their quest pressed heavily in Miss Marple's handbag. The cryptic map, Eleanor Grayson's diary, the love letters, the vine-engraved ring, Charles Thorne's key, the clock tower's note, and the empty 10 from the gazebo, its message haunting her, taken by one we trusted. Seek the jeweler who crafted it. In London, the jeweler's tale had confirmed the locket's purpose, a hidden deed proving the Thorne family's claim to disputed land, and hinted that Abigail Wren, a trusted friend, might have taken it. Now the note from the hollow tree. The locket waits where the village dreams beneath the starlight's gaze, pointed to this abandoned chapel, a place where the village's dreams had long faded into silence. But the mysterious figure trailing them from London, distinct from Jacob Harrow's bitter pursuit, warned Miss Marple that the locket's truth was a prize others would kill to keep buried. Miss Marple adjusted her shawl, her eyes scanning the chapel's ivy-choked silhouette. "Tommy, we must be swift and silent," she said, her voice barely above the whisper of the evening breeze. "The chapel is our best hope for the locket, but we're not alone in this hunt. That stranger from London followed us for a reason." Tommy clutched his torch, its beam dimmed to avoid drawing attention. "You think it's someone working for Lady Grayson? Or maybe Margaret Wren, Abigail's daughter? She might know where the locket went." "Possibly," Miss Marple replied, her gaze fixed on the chapel's boarded windows. "Margaret is our next stop, but first we search the chapel. Eleanor's clue about starlight suggests something open to the sky, perhaps a broken roof or a hidden niche. Let's find it." The chapel door, warped by years of neglect, creaked as Tommy pushed it open, revealing a cavernous interior thick with dust and the faint scent of decayed flowers. Moonlight filtered through a shattered skylight, casting dappled shadows across the cracked stone floor. The altar at the far end, its surface carved with the familiar vine motif, stood like a sentinel under the starlit gap above. Miss Marple's heart quickened. "There, Tommy," she said, pointing. "The starlight's gaze falls on the altar. That's where we start." They approached cautiously, their footsteps muffled by layers of dust. The altar's carvings matched the locket's design, a deliberate echo of Eleanor and Charles's love. Tommy ran his fingers along the edges, searching for a seam. "Aunt Jane, it's solid," he said, frowning. "No hidden compartments like the crypt." Miss Marple knelt, her eyes catching a faint irregularity in the floor beneath the altar, a stone slightly raised, its edges worn smooth. "Try here, dear," she said, tapping it. Eleanor was fond of hiding things beneath stones. Tommy pried at the stone with a pocket knife, his breath catching as it shifted. Beneath was a small cavity, and within it a silver locket gleamed, its vine-engraved surface catching the starlight. Miss Marple lifted it carefully, her fingers trembling with the weight of their discovery. The locket's sapphire clasp clicked open, revealing a tiny folded parchment, a deed. Its ink faded but legible, granting the river land to the Thorne family, signed by both Eleanor and Charles in 1922. "We found it," Tommy whispered, his voice awed. "The deed, it's real." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, but her triumph was tempered by caution. "Yes, dear, but this is no end. The deed threatens de Grayson's legacy. We must protect it." As she spoke, a shadow moved at the chapel's entrance. The dark-coated figure from London stepped into the moonlight, his scarf lowered to reveal a weathered face, not Jacob Harrow's, but unfamiliar, with cold, calculating eyes. "Hand it over, Miss Marple," he said, his voice smooth but menacing. "That locket's caused enough trouble." Miss Marple clutched the locket, her voice steady. "And who are you, sir, to demand it? This belongs to the Thornes, not to you or the Graysons." The man stepped closer, a glint of steel in his hand, a small knife, its blade catching the starlight. "Name's not important. My employer wants that deed gone. You've been clever, old lady, but this ends now." Tommy tensed, his torch raised like a weapon, but Miss Marple's hand on his arm kept him still. "Violence won't bury the truth," she said, her eyes locked on the stranger's. "If your employer is Lady Grayson, tell her the locket's found and the village will know its story. Or is it someone else pulling your strings?" The man's lips twitched, but before he could answer, a second figure burst through the door, Jacob Harrow, his face flushed with fury. "You!" he shouted at the stranger. "You're the one who's been dogging me. The locket's mine by right." The stranger spun, his knife flashing, but Jacob tackled him, the two men crashing into a pew. Miss Marple seized the moment, grabbing Tommy's arm. "Run, dear," she said, darting for the side door. They slipped into the night, the locket, and deed safe in her handbag, as shouts echoed behind them. They reached the village green, breathless but unharmed, and Miss Marple's mind raced. "Tommy, we can't stay here. The locket's too dangerous to keep exposed. We'll hide it at my cottage until we can speak to Margaret Wren." At her cottage, Miss Marple locked the door and spread the locket and deed on the table. The deed was a legal marvel, its wording airtight, naming Charles Thorne as the rightful owner of the river land. Eleanor's signature, bold and defiant, sealed its authenticity. But the stranger's attack and Jacob's sudden appearance raised new questions. Was Jacob an ally, or had he betrayed them too? And who was the stranger's employer? The next morning they visited Margaret Wren's lace shop on Baker Street, a quaint storefront filled with delicate threads. Margaret, a wiry woman in her 50s with her mother's sharp eyes, greeted them cautiously. "Miss Marple, what's this about? I don't get many visitors." Miss Marple produced the locket, watching Margaret's reaction. "We found this in the old chapel, Miss Wren. Your mother, Abigail, was involved with its creation. Did she ever speak of it, or why it was taken?" Margaret's face paled, her fingers clutching a spool of lace. "Mother, she never spoke of it directly, but I found a letter after she died. Said she took the locket to protect Eleanor, hid it in the chapel when William Grayson threatened her. She felt guilty, said it wasn't hers to keep. I thought it was long gone. Miss Marple's." Heart soft. "You've helped us greatly, Margaret. The locket holds a deed that could right an old wrong, but someone's desperate to stop us. Have you seen a stranger in a dark coat or Jacob Harrow around your shop?" Margaret shook her head. "No, but I've felt watched lately. Be careful, Miss Marple. The Graysons have long arms." As they left, Miss Marple's resolve hardened. The locket and deed were secure, but the stranger's attack and Jacob's involvement suggested a conspiracy deeper than she'd imagined. The village council would need to see the deed, but first she had to ensure their safety. The truth was in her hands, and she would not let it slip away. Chapter 13. The Truth Unraveled. The first light of dawn crept over St. Mary Mead, casting a soft glow through the lace curtains of Miss Marple's cottage, where she sat at her kitchen table, the silver locket and its precious contents, the deed to the Thorne family's river land, spread before her. Her handbag, now a repository of the quest's relics, held the cryptic map, Eleanor Grayson's diary, the love letters, the vine-engraved ring, Charles Thorne's key, and the notes that had led them through a labyrinth of clues. The locket, its sapphire clasp, glinting in the morning light, was the culmination of their search, its deed a legal testament to the Graysons' betrayal and the Thornes' rightful claim. But the violent encounter in the chapel, with the mysterious stranger's knife and Jacob Harrow's desperate intervention, underscored the danger of the truth they'd uncovered. Someone, possibly Lady Grayson or another unseen player, was determined to keep the deed buried, and Miss Marple knew the next step would require all her cunning to bring justice without further peril. She sipped her tea, her eyes tracing the deed's faded ink, signed by Eleanor Grayson and Charles Thorne in 1922. It was a binding document, its wording precise and witnessed by a long-dead notary. The land, a fertile stretch along the river, had been the heart of the Grayson-Thorne feud, and its loss had ruined the Thornes. Miss Marple's mind churned with the implications. Presenting the deed to the village council would expose the Graysons' deceit, but it would also ignite a firestorm of resentment. Jacob Harrow's loyalty to the Thornes and the stranger's cold menace suggested the truth was a spark in a tinderbox. A knock at the door broke her reverie. Tommy Beresford burst in, his face flushed from the morning chill, his satchel slung over his shoulder. "Aunt Jane, you're up early. After last night I thought you'd sleep till noon. That bloke with The knife think he's still out there?" Miss Marple smiled, offering him a biscuit. "Likely, Tommy, but he won't catch us unawares again. The locket and deed are safe, but we must act quickly. The village council meets tomorrow, and will present the deed to ensure the Thorns' claim is recognized. But first we need to speak with Clara Thorne. She deserves to know what we've found." Tommy's eyes widened. "Clara? Won't that tip off Lady Grayson? She's got to be behind that stranger, right?" "Not necessarily," Miss Marple said, her voice thoughtful. "The stranger mentioned an employer, but Jacob's interference suggests a split in motives. Clara may help us understand who else has a stake in this. Let's visit her before anyone else knows we have the locket." They set off for the Thorne estate, the village waking slowly under a pale sky. The estate's crumbling facade loomed ahead, its ivy-choked walls a testament to its fall. Clara Thorne answered their knock, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes wary but softening at the sight of Miss Marple's basket of scones. "Miss Marple, Tommy," she said, ushering them into the dusty parlor. "You're back so soon. Have you found something?" Miss Marple produced the locket, its vine design catching the light. "We found it, Clara, in the old chapel. Inside is a deed, signed by Eleanor Grayson and your great-uncle Charles, proving the river land belongs to your family. We intend to present it to the council, but we need your help to ensure it's safe." Clara's hands trembled as she took the locket, her eyes filling with tears. "The deed! After all these years, my grandmother swore Charles was innocent, that the Graysons framed him. But why now? Why bring this up after so long?" Miss Marple's voice was gentle but firm. "Someone sent me an anonymous letter, urging me to find the locket. And someone else, a stranger, tried to stop us last night with violence. Do you know anyone who might want this deed destroyed?" Clara's face paled. "Jacob Harrow's been around asking questions about the family. He's loyal to us, but bitter, and there's been a man, not local, watching the estate. I thought he was a creditor, but now I'm not sure." Tommy leaned forward, his voice eager. "A man in a dark coat? We saw him in London, and he pulled a knife on us in the chapel." Clara gasped. "A knife? My God, Miss Marple, you're in danger. If the Graysons know you have this, they'll do anything to keep it quiet." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "Which is why we're moving quickly. Clara, will you stand with us at the council meeting? Your voice, as a Thorne, will lend weight to the deed's authenticity." Clara nodded, clutching the locket. "For my family, I will. But be careful, Lady Grayson's influence runs deep." As they left the estate, Miss Marple's senses prickled. A rustle in the hedgerow caught her attention, but no figure emerged. "Tommy, we're being watched again," she whispered. "Let's take the back path to the village hall and arrange the council meeting." The village hall was a modest building, its walls lined with portraits of past councillors. Mr. Pym, the antiques dealer and council chair, greeted them warmly. "Miss Marple, what's this about an urgent meeting? Something to do with your treasure hunt?" Miss Marple smiled, her tone light but purposeful. "A matter of justice. Mr. Pym, we've uncovered evidence of an old wrong, a deed proving the Thorne family's claim to the river land, stolen by the Graysons. We'd like to present it to the council tomorrow with Clara Thorne's support." Mr. Pym's eyebrows rose. "That's a bold claim. Lady Grayson won't take kindly to it, but if you've got proof, we'll hear you out." I'll call the council for noon." As they left the hall, Tommy whispered, "What if that stranger shows up? Or Jacob? We can't let them get the locket." "We won't," Miss Marple said, patting her handbag. "But we'll need allies. Let's visit Constable Barnes. He should know what's at stake." At the police station, Constable Barnes listened intently as Miss Marple recounted their findings, omitting only the chapel's violent encounter to avoid alarming him unduly. "A deed, you say?" he said, rubbing his chin. "That'll stir things up. I've seen Jacob Harrow lurking near the Thorne estate, and there's been talk of a stranger in the village asking about you. I'll keep an eye out during the meeting." "Thank you, Constable," Miss Marple said, her mind already on the next step. The council meeting was set, but the locket needed safeguarding. She decided to entrust it to the vicar, Mr. Clement, whose neutrality would protect it from prying hands. At the vicarage, Mr. Clement's study was a haven of books and calm. He examined the locket with awe, his fingers tracing the sapphire clasp. "A remarkable find, Miss Marple. I'll keep it in the church safe until tomorrow. No one will think to look there." As they left, the village was settling into dusk, the air heavy with anticipation. Miss Marple's cottage felt like a fortress as she locked the door, the deed copied for safety and hidden in her knitting basket. But sleep eluded her, the stranger's knife and Jacob's fury replaying in her mind. At midnight, a soft thud outside her window made her rise, peering through the curtains. A figure dark-coated, scarf-high, slipped into the shadows. Leaving an envelope on her doorstep. She retrieved it, her heart steady but her senses sharp. Inside was a single line in a rough hand: "The truth will cost you." Miss Marple's lips pursed. The warning was clear, but so was her resolve. The next day, the village hall was packed. The councillors, Mr. Pym, Mrs. Carter, and others seated at a long table, with villagers crowding the benches. Clara Thorne stood beside Miss Marple, and Tommy, her face pale but determined. Lady Grayson sat in the front row, her silver hair impeccable, her eyes cold as she watched them. Mr. Pym called the meeting to order. "Miss Marple, you've requested this session to present evidence of a historical matter. Proceed." Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice clear. "Thank you, Mr. Pym. We've uncovered a deed hidden in a locket by Eleanor Grayson and Charles Thorne, proving the river land belongs to the Thorne family. The Graysons, through William Grayson, framed Charles for theft, ruining the Thornes. This deed, signed in 1922, sets the record straight." She produced the copied deed, passing it to the councillors. Murmurs rippled through the room, and Lady Grayson's face tightened, her hands clenching her purse. "This is preposterous," she said, rising. "A forged document, dragged up by a busybody to tarnish my family's name." Clara Thorne's voice cut through the tension. "It's no forgery. My family suffered for decades because of your ancestors' lies. The deed is real, and I claim it for the Thornes." The room erupted in whispers, but Miss Marple raised a hand. "Lady Grayson, if you doubt the deed's authenticity, let it be examined by a solicitor. But I have the locket, the letters, and Eleanor's diary, all corroborating the truth. Will you deny them?" Lady Grayson's composure cracked, her voice trembling. My family acted to protect our legacy. William did what he thought was right. If there was a deed, it was lost fairly in a legal dispute." "Legal?" Clara snapped. "Your brothers spread lies, drove Charles out, and left my family in ruin. Mr. Pym banged his gavel. Enough. The deed will be verified, and will. Consult records. If true, the land reverts to Miss Thorne. As the meeting adjourned, Lady Grayson approached Miss Marple, her eyes blazing but her voice low. You've opened a wound, Miss Marple. I hope you're prepared for the consequences. Miss Marple met her gaze, unflinching. The truth heals, Lady Grayson, even if it stings. Outside, the village buzzed with gossip, and Tommy grinned. We did it, Aunt Jane. The Thornes get their land back. Miss Marple nodded, but her eyes scanned the crowd. Neither Jacob nor the stranger was present, but their absence felt ominous. The locket was safe, the deed presented, and justice promised. But the warnings, the truth will cost you, echoed in her mind. As she and Tommy walked home, the village felt lighter. Its wounds beginning to heal, but Miss Marple knew the final chapter of this tale was yet to come. Chapter 14. A quiet resolution. The late summer sun bathed St. Mary Mead in a golden haze, its warmth softening the edges of a village forever changed by the truth unveiled in the village hall. Miss Jane Marple sat in her garden, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically as she worked on a soft blue shawl, the silver locket's journey now a memory etched into the village's heart. The locket, with its vine-engraved surface and sapphire clasp, rested in the village museum, a gleaming symbol of justice alongside the deed that had restored the Thorne family's rightful claim to the river land. The council's decision, unanimous and binding, had stripped the Graysons of their ill-gotten wealth, and Lady Grayson's defeat had sent ripples through St. Mary Mead's quiet streets. Yet, as Miss Marple sipped her tea, the lingering shadow of the mysterious stranger and Jacob Harrow's desperate involvement nagged at her, a loose thread in an otherwise neatly tied knot. The garden was alive with the hum of bees and the scent of lavender, a peaceful contrast to the turmoil of the past weeks. Miss Marple's handbag, now lighter without its burden of clues, the cryptic map, Eleanor Grayson's diary, the love letters, the vine-engraved ring, Charles Thorne's key, and the notes that had led them from the oak tree to the chapel, sat beside her, a silent partner in her triumph. The confrontation in the chapel, where the stranger's knife had gleamed under starlight and Jacob's unexpected intervention had saved them, felt like a distant storm. The council meeting had unraveled the truth. William Grayson's fraud, Eleanor and Charles's forbidden love, and the locket's hidden deed. But the stranger's employer remained a mystery, and Miss Marple's instincts told her the story wasn't entirely finished. A gentle knock at the garden gate broke her reverie. Tommy Beresford, his sandy hair neatly combed for once, stepped through, carrying a small basket of apples from the vicarage orchard. "Afternoon, Aunt Jane," he said, his grin as bright as the sun. "Thought you might like these. The village is still buzzing about the council meeting. You're a hero." Miss Marple smiled, setting her knitting aside. "Nonsense, Tommy. I only followed the clues. The real heroes are Eleanor and Charles, who hid the truth so carefully, and Clara Thorne, who carry their legacy forward." Tommy plopped onto the bench beside her, biting into an apple. "Clara's already planning to rebuild the Thorne estate. Says she'd turn it into a community garden, maybe even a museum for the locket. But what about that stranger? And Jacob? They just vanished." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, her mind sifting through the final pieces. Jacob's motives were clear. He wanted justice for his family's loyalty to the Thornes. His outburst at the council exposed his heart, but also his limits. The stranger, though, he was no ordinary thug. Someone sent him, and I suspect we'll never know who. As if on cue, the gate creaked again, and Clara Thorne appeared, her silver hair catching the sunlight, a handmade shawl draped over her shoulders. In her hands was another shawl, intricately woven with patterns of vines and roses, a nod to the locket's design. "Miss Marple, Tommy," she said, her voice warm with gratitude. "I came to thank you. This is for you, Miss Marple, a small token for giving my family back its name." Miss Marple accepted the shawl, her fingers tracing the delicate threads. "It's beautiful, Clara. You've no need to thank me. The truth was always there, waiting to be found." Clara sat, her eyes distant. "I've been thinking about Eleanor and Charles. They loved each other so fiercely, yet paid such a price. The locket was their vow, wasn't it? A promise to fight for what was right." Miss Marple nodded, her gaze softening. "A vow kept through decades of silence. The locket's truth was stark, but it's brought healing. The village is stronger for it." Tommy leaned forward, his voice curious. "What about Lady Grayson?" She looked ready to spit fire at the council. "Think she caused trouble?" Miss Marple's lips pursed. "Lady Grayson's pride is wounded, but her power is diminished. The council's decision is final, and the village knows the truth. She'll retreat, I think, to lick her wounds at Haverford Manor." As they spoke, a soft rustle came from the hedgerow beyond the garden. Miss Marple's senses sharpened, but she kept her tone light. "Tommy, dear, would you check the gate? I believe we have a visitor." Tommy rose, his torch at the ready, and peered into the shadows. A figure stepped forward, not the stranger, nor Jacob, but Constable Barnes, his uniform crisp, his face apologetic. "Sorry to intrude, Miss Marple," he said, tipping his hat. "I've news about that chap from the chapel. We caught him this morning, lurking near the river. Says his name's Thomas Vane, a hired man from London. Won't name his employer, but he's confessed to trying to scare you off. Said the locket was too dangerous to be found." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "Thomas Vane, and no employer named? Interesting. Did he say why the locket was dangerous?" Barnes shook his head. "Only that it could ruin powerful. People were holding him for now, but he's not talking. As for Jacob Harrow, he's left the village, said he's done with old feuds. Left a note at the pub, apologizing for his part." Miss Marple's knitting resumed, her mind easing. "Thank you, Constable. That ties up some loose ends. The locket's safe, and the truth is out. Let's hope Mr. Vane's employer thinks twice before meddling again." As Barnes left, Clara smiled, her eyes bright. "You've done more than solve a mystery, Miss Marple. You've given us peace." The village celebrated that evening, a quiet gathering on the green, where the locket was unveiled in the museum, its story told in hushed tones. Children ran through the grass, their laughter mingling with the fiddler's tune, while villagers toasted to new beginnings. Clara stood beside Miss Marple, her shawl a badge of her family's redemption. "The Thornes and Graysons are at peace," she said, her voice soft. "Thanks to you." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes on the sunset. "The village has a way of healing itself, Clara. I only nudged it along." As the stars emerged, Miss Marple returned to her cottage, her garden gate creaking softly. She sat by the fire, the shawl from Clara draped over her shoulders, its patterns a reminder of the locket's journey. The mysterious stranger, Thomas Vane, was in custody, his employer a shadow that might never step into the light. Jacob Harrow had fled, his quest for justice fulfilled, but his heart still heavy. The locket's dark truth had righted an old wrong, and St. Mary Mead was whole again. Miss Marple's knitting needles resumed their dance, her thoughts drifting to Eleanor and Charles, whose love had outlasted their tragedy. The locket, now a museum piece, was a testament to their courage. As the fire crackled, she smiled, content that some secrets, once uncovered, could be laid to rest. The village slept under the stars, and Miss Marple, ever watchful, was ready for whatever mystery might come next. Chapter 15. The shadows return. The crisp October air swept through St. Mary Mead, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke, as Miss Jane Marple sat in her cozy sitting-room, her knitting needles crafting a scarf in deep crimson, a color to match the season's fiery hues. The silver locket, now a cherished exhibit in the village museum, had settled the Thorne-Grayson feud, its hidden deed restoring the Thorne family's riverland and exposing William Grayson's fraud. The village had embraced the truth, with Clara Thorne's plans for a community garden blossoming, and Lady Grayson retreating into the shadows of Haverford Manor. Yet, as Miss Marple's needles clicked, a faint unease lingered. The mysterious Thomas Vane, the hired thug who had confronted them in the old chapel, remained silent about his employer, and Jacob Harrow's sudden departure after the council meeting left questions unanswered. The anonymous letter that sparked the quest. The locket bears a stark truth, Miss Marple. Find it, or the village will pay, still echoed, its sender a ghost in the village's quiet lanes. A sharp knock at the door broke her reverie. Tommy Beresford burst in, his cheeks flushed from the autumn chill, a crumpled envelope clutched in his hand. "Aunt Jane, you won't believe this," he said, tossing his cap onto the table. "Found this slipped under the museum door this morning. It's addressed to you." Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her heart quickening as she took the envelope. The handwriting was unfamiliar, sharp and hurried, with no return address. She slit it open, revealing a single sheet. The locket's truth was only the beginning. Seek the ledger in the manor's vault, or the village will face a darker secret. Her eyes narrowed, the words stirring a familiar thrill. "Another anonymous note," she murmured. "Someone's not done with us, Tommy." Tommy's eyes widened. "The manor's vault? It's Haverford Manor Lady Grayson's place. Think it's a trap, like the hollow tree?" "Possibly," Miss Marple said, folding the note carefully. But the locket's deed shook the Graysons' foundation. This ledger, whatever it is, may hold a secret they're desperate to keep buried. We must tread carefully. Thomas Vane's employer is still out there, and this feels like their handiwork. Tommy leaned forward, his voice eager. "So what's the plan? Storm the manor and demand to see the vault?" Miss Marple's lips twitched. "Hardly, dear. Lady Grayson won't welcome us after the council's verdict. We'll need an ally, someone with access to the manor. Mrs. Hargraves, the butler's wife, was once a maid there. She's discreet but observant, and she owes me a favor after I helped her nephew last spring." The walk to the Hargreaves' cottage, a tidy dwelling near the village green, was brisk, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. Mrs. Hargreaves, a plump woman with a sharp gaze, welcomed them with tea and a wary smile. Miss Marple, young. "Tommy," she said, setting out biscuits, "What brings you here? Not more trouble, I hope." Miss Marple produced the note, her voice gentle but probing. "Mrs. Hargreaves, we've received a troubling message about a ledger in Haverford Manor's vault." "You worked there for years. Do you know of such a thing?" Mrs. Hargreaves's face paled, her fingers tightening around her teacup. "The vault? That's an old place, locked tight since Mr. William Grayson's day. I never went in, only the family had keys. But there were whispers among the staff, back in the 20s, about a ledger William kept. Said it recorded debts. And dealings, not just money, but secrets. Things that could ruin folk." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. "Secrets? Did anyone mention the thorns or the locket?" Mrs. Hargreaves hesitated, glancing at the window. "Not directly, but William was a hard man. After Charles Thorne vanished, he bragged about settling scores. The ledger might hold proof of what he did, maybe worse than stealing land. But you'd need to get past Lady Grayson, and she's fiercer than ever since the council meeting." Tommy's eyes lit up. "We've got keys, don't we? The ones with E, G, and CT. Maybe one fits the vault." Miss Marple shook her head. "Those keys were for the locket's hiding places, dear. The vault will need something else. Mrs. Hargreaves, is there a way into the manor without alerting Lady Grayson?" Mrs. Hargreaves sighed, her voice low. "There's a servant's passage, hidden behind the kitchen pantry. My husband showed it to me years ago, used for deliveries in the old days. But it's risky, Miss Marple. If you're caught, Lady Grayson won't take kindly to trespassers." "Thank you," Miss Marple said, slipping her a scone. "We'll be discreet." As they left, Tommy whispered, "A secret passage? This is getting exciting. But what if that vain chap's still around?" Miss Marple's eyes scanned the green, catching a flicker of movement near the bakery. "He's in custody, Tommy. But his employer isn't. We'll move tonight under cover of darkness." That evening, the village slept under a starless sky, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Miss Marple and Tommy approached Haverford Manor, its windows dark save for a single light in the upper hall. The servants' passage, hidden behind a rusted gate, led to a narrow tunnel, smelling of damp stone and old flour. Tommy's torch illuminated cobwebs and forgotten crates, the path winding to a wooden door behind the pantry. They emerged into the manor's kitchen, silent and shadowy. Miss Marple led the way to the library, where the vault was rumored to lie, her memory of the secret passage from their earlier visit guiding her. The oak bookcase, once a gateway to the chest of letters, stood unmoved, but Mrs. Hargreaves had mentioned a second panel hidden in the fireplace. Tommy tapped the hearth's stones, his breath catching as one clicked. A small door swung open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. "The vault," he whispered, his torch sweeping the gloom. The vault was a cold stone chamber, its walls lined with locked cabinets. In the center stood a heavy safe, its lock gleaming with a vine-like design. Miss Marple's heart raced. She had no key, but the safe's mechanism looked familiar, its pattern echoing the locket's clasp. "Tommy, try pressing the vines," she said, her voice steady. Tommy pressed the carved vines in sequence, and with a soft clunk the safe opened. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, its pages thick with William Grayson's meticulous script. Miss Marple flipped through it, her eyes catching entries dated 1923. Payments to a London solicitor to forge land records, bribes to silence witnesses, and a chilling note, "C. Thorne removed, threat neutralized." Her breath caught. Charles didn't vanish. He was driven out, or worse. Before they could read further, footsteps echoed above. Tommy swung his torch, catching a glimpse of a figure in the library, Lady Grayson, her face pale but resolute, a heavy candlestick in her hand. "You've gone too far, Miss Marple," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "That ledger stays here." Miss Marple clutched the ledger, her voice calm but firm. "The truth is out, Lady Grayson. This ledger proves your father's crimes fraud. And possibly worse, the village deserves to know." Lady Grayson raised the candlestick, but a shout from the passage stopped her. Constable Barnes burst in, his uniform disheveled, followed by Clara Thorne. "Drop it, Lady Grayson," he said, his voice steady. "I got word from Mrs. Hargreaves you might be here." Lady Grayson's shoulders sagged, the candlestick clattering to the floor. "It's over," she whispered, her eyes hollow. "My father's sins. I only wanted to protect our name." Clara stepped forward, her voice soft but unyielding. "Your name was built on lies. Let the truth heal us all." The next morning the village council convened again, the ledger laid bare. Its entries confirmed William Grayson's treachery, and whispers of Charles Thorne's fate sparked calls for further investigation. Lady Grayson, humbled, agreed to fund the Thorne estate's restoration, a gesture of atonement. Thomas Vane's employer remained a shadow, but with the ledger public, their power was broken. Miss Marple sat in her garden, the ledger now in the museum beside the locket, her knitting resumed. Tommy, munching an apple, grinned. "You did it again, Aunt Jane. Solved the mystery and saved the village." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes on the horizon. "The village saved itself, Tommy. I only listened to its whispers." As the sun set, St. Mary Mead breathed freely, its secrets laid bare. The locket's truth and the ledger's darker revelations had woven a new chapter in the village's story, and Miss Marple, ever watchful, was ready for whatever came next. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps he didn't. Eliza could be a pseudonym or a misunderstanding. We need to meet Edward Langley and see his letters. Let's send a telegram to Bristol, inviting him to the village." The next day, Edward Langley arrived at the Black Boar, the village pub, a wiry man in his 40s with sharp eyes and a solicitor's briefcase. He greeted Miss Marple and Tommy with a cautious smile, setting a bundle of letters on the table. "Miss Marple, Mr. Beresford," he said, his voice clipped but polite. "I'm Charles Thorne's grandson, through his son, Henry. These letters prove it, written by my grandmother Eliza Harper to Charles before he disappeared." Miss Marple examined the letters, their ink faded but clear, detailing a secret. Marriage in London and the birth of a son, Henry, in 1923. One letter mentioned a gift Charles left for his son, a silver ring with a vine design, matching the one Miss Marple had found. "This ring," she said, producing it from her handbag. "Was it this?" Langley's eyes widened. "That's it. My father wore it until he passed. How did you get it?" Miss Marple's voice was gentle but probing. "It was found near the river, part of a trail to the locket. Mr. Langley, why come forward now, after the locket's revelation?" Langley's jaw tightened. "I read about the deed in the papers. My father told me stories of St. Mary Mead, of the land stolen from us. I want what's rightfully mine, Not just for me, but for Charles's memory. Tommy frowned. Sounds fair, but how do we know you're not working for someone? We've had trouble anonymous notes, a thug named Vane. Langley's face darkened. I heard about Vane. I swear I'm alone in this. My letters are real. Check them with any expert. Miss Marple's instincts prickled. Langley's story rang true, but the timing was too convenient. We'll verify your claim. Mr. Langley, she said, but someone's been stirring trouble in the village. Have you had contact with anyone here, perhaps Jacob Harrow? Langley shook his head. Never met him. I came because the locket's truth gave me hope. That evening, Miss Marple and Tommy visited Margaret Wren at her lace shop, hoping to confirm Abigail's role. Margaret, her sharp eyes wary, listened as Miss Marple explained Langley's claim. My mother witnessed a marriage, she said, frowning. She never mentioned it, but she kept secrets for Eleanor. After Charles vanished, she was scared, said the Graysons would come for her. Maybe she helped hide a child. Miss Marple's mind raced. Did she leave any papers, Margaret? Something about a marriage or a son? Margaret rummaged through a trunk, producing a faded journal. This was Mother's. I never read it too painful. She handed it to Miss Marple, who flipped through its pages, finding an entry from 1923. Helped Charles and Eliza to London. Their son, Henry, born in secret. Grayson's men are watching. Hid the ring for safety. Miss Marple's heart sank. It's true, then. Charles had a son. But why now, after a century? As they left the shop, a shadow moved across the street. A figure in a dark coat, scarf high. Tommy tensed, but Miss Marple's hand steadied him. Not now, dear, she whispered. We're close to the truth. The next day, Miss Marple called a meeting at the village hall, inviting Clara Thorne, Edward Langley, and the council. She presented the journal and letters, laying out the evidence. Mr. Langley is Charles Thorne's grandson, she said, her voice clear. The land belongs to the Thornes, and he has a claim. Clara's eyes filled with tears. If he's family, he's welcome to share it. The Thornes have suffered enough. Lady Grayson, present but subdued, spoke softly. I've no fight left. Let the truth stand. The council agreed to recognize Langley's claim, dividing the land between him and Clara. As the meeting ended, Miss Marple spotted a figure outside Thomas Vane's employer, perhaps, or a new shadow. She smiled faintly, her knitting needles ready for the next mystery. St. Mary Mead was at peace, but its secrets, like its seasons, would always return. Chapter 16. The forgotten air, the autumn winds, swept through St. Mary Mead, rustling the golden leaves that blanketed the village green, as Miss Jane Marple sat in her cozy sitting-room, her knitting needles weaving a pattern of soft greens and golds. The silver locket, now enshrined in the village museum, alongside William Grayson's damning ledger, had brought justice to the Thorne family, restoring their river land and exposing a century of fraud. The ledger's revelations, bribes, forged records, and a chilling hint that Charles Thorne was removed by William Grayson had reshaped the village's history, with Lady Grayson's reluctant atonement funding the Thorne estate's revival. Yet as Miss Marple sipped her morning tea, a new unease stirred. The mysterious Thomas Vane, the thug who had confronted them in the chapel, remained silent about his employer, and the anonymous notes that had driven her quest hinted at deeper secrets still buried in the village's heart. A brisk knock at the door announced Tommy Beresford's arrival, his face alight with excitement, a folded newspaper clutched in his hand. "Aunt Jane, you've got to see this," he said, bounding into the room and spreading the paper on the table. "It's in the local Gazette. Someone's claiming to be Charles Thorne's heir. Says they've got proof he didn't just vanish." Miss Marple adjusted her spectacles, scanning the article. A man named Edward Langley, a solicitor from Bristol, had come forward, asserting he was Charles Thorne's grandson, through a secret marriage before Charles's disappearance in 1923. Langley claimed to possess letters proving Charles had son born in secrecy and raised away from St. Mary Mead to escape the Grayson feud. "This is most intriguing," Miss Marple murmured, her mind racing. "If true, it changes everything." The Thorne land, now restored to Clara, could face a new claim. Tommy's eyes widened. "You think this Langley's legit? Or is it another trick, like those anonymous notes?" Miss Marple's lips pursed, her knitting paused. "We've learned to distrust coincidence, Tommy. The locket and ledger stirred old wounds, and now this heir appears just as the village settles. We must meet Mr. Langley and see his proof. But first, let's visit Clara Thorne. She'll be as surprised as we are." The Thorne estate, once a crumbling relic, was beginning to bloom under Clara's care. Scaffolding lined its walls, and workers tended newly planted orchards by the river. Clara greeted them in the refurbished parlor, her silver hair gleaming, her expression a mix of pride and wariness. "Miss Marple, Tommy," she said, offering tea in delicate china. "I saw the Gazette. An heir to Charles? It's impossible. He never married, or so my grandmother said." Miss Marple produced the newspaper, her voice gentle. "The article claims Charles had a secret marriage and a son. This Edward Langley says he has letters to prove it. Have you heard any family stories of such a thing?" Clara's hands trembled, setting her cup down. "Nothing certain. My grandmother mentioned Charles leaving for London before he vanished. Said he was heartbroken over Eleanor Grayson. But a marriage? She'd have told me. If this Langley's telling the truth, he could claim the land we've just won back." Tommy leaned forward, his voice eager. "We could check the parish records. See if there's a marriage listed. Or talk to this Langley bloke ourselves." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "A sound plan, Tommy, but we must be cautious. The ledger revealed William Grayson's ruthlessness. Someone may be using this heir to stir trouble. Let's visit the vicarage first, then arrange to meet Mr. Langley." At the vicarage, Mr. Clement welcomed them into his cluttered study, its shelves groaning with parish records. "An heir to Charles Thorne," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "That's a surprise. Let me check the marriage rolls from 1922 to 23. He pulled a dusty ledger, flipping through its pages. "Nothing here for Charles Thorne, but there's a curious entry, a marriage license issued in London, 1922, for a Charles T. and an Eliza Harper, witnessed by Abigail Wren. Could that be him?" Miss Marple's heart quickened. Abigail Wren? She was Eleanor's friend and Margaret's mother. This connects to the locket. "Mr. Clement, do you have records of a child born to this couple?" Mr. Clement shook his head. "Not here, but London parishes might. If Charles had a son in secret, he'd have kept it quiet to protect them from the Graysons." As they left the vicarage, Tommy whispered, "Eliza Harper? Who's she?" And why would Charles marry someone else if he loved Eleanor?